Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. We respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of the land. We will have a public hearing at 6 p.m. So we will run this regular council meeting up until 5:55, and then we will do an adjournment into that public hearing and return back to our meeting after. There are two changes to the agenda. My apologies. For the delegation, with council's approval, we're going to have B moved to A. So we'll have Hubert speak before Charlie in regards to the pump station. And we have a fourth delegation added into D for Mary Lou Moffat on behalf of Brooks Place, the strata in regards to DBP 25-3 for 468 Pritchard. So if council is okay with that one change of swapping B and A and the addition of D, I'll move that we add those two changes to the delegations, and I'll get a seconder, please. Any questions or comments on those two changes to delegations? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Got me there. I'll move for an adoption of the agenda for April 16th, 2025. Seconded. Any questions or comments on the agenda this evening? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So I will now ask for the delegations to begin. You will have 10 minutes and you're welcome to come up and either sit down or you can stand and use the mic there, and we'll have any possible questions from council at the end of the 10 minutes. So we have Hubert in regards to DVP 25-1 Comox pump station. So you're welcome to come up to the mic. Welcome, and it is on now. Thank you.
Hubert Miguet, and Belinda and I live right beside the pump station that is being proposed for the addition. And yeah, the bottom line is there's just a few unsettled things that we haven't kind of come to the exact terms. Obviously, there's a proposal for the addition. There's renderings that have been submitted, and the renderings that I have and have been submitted apparently are different than the ones that are being approved by the street, which I reached out to Charlie, and it's just that particular drawing is to move forward on these setbacks and the variance that is being applied. So that cleared that up to a certain degree, as long as the end product is as rendering one, which it is called. And what was in question, which was the black charcoal siding, it stated that it was one metal siding of modern, and apparently now there is a pony wall that is on that particular addition, which we found out on Monday that there is a pony wall on that, which changes the aesthetics of it. So we reached out and trying to, come to some kind of terms. Can that be rectified? Can that be metal cladding over top? And it doesn't appear so. Which everyone that voted on this, nobody knew there was a pony wall. If it would have been disclosed, maybe we would have had no, it was coming up, but everybody assumed it was black metal cladding all the way down to the one spot. So anyways, and it does show corrugated, which is now, it's a 12-inch standing seam, which is what was on rendering one, which is our preference. There's a fence on the southwest side that is not on the drawings. We hadn't had any drawings to date as of last week when this surfaced, which don't really show the addition as it's going to be. So there's still a little bit of gray area. So there's a fencing, as long as the fencing that is being proposed removes the whole chain link fence and all new fencing. I'm not sure if that's exactly what is being proposed, because right now all we see is the fence stops and it does not continue. So I'm not sure if that's being removed, added, or not. So yeah, so the fencing is, as long as all the chain link is being removed and added as to per drawing, then we're good with that. Bottom line is we worked with Charlie and CVRD for several years on different little things here and there as it's come up, and we've always gotten along. Bottom line is we just want, a few things, because this does impact us. We never fought the variance. We decided this is a thing that needs to happen. So we didn't push back on that in any way. All we decided to do is let's try to make it finished properly, work with CVRD, and try to get a happy medium somewhere. So yeah, bottom line is it's aesthetics for the finished siding, fencing, the shrubbery and all that stuff seems to be in place. I think that's about it. Yeah, I think pretty much yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I'll just ask you to just wait there for one more moment
Okay,
just to see
sure,
if there's any
yeah.
questions from council, which may or may not be. Councillor Kirk.
Mayor, is it possible to ask staff a question at this time?
Yeah.
So just a question, if I may, through the chair to staff. Could you just remind us the role of council with this project? I understand we have a limited role in actual design and those items. I know a lot of discussions between the residents and the CVRD, but just if you could clarify what the role of council is with regards to the delegations tonight. Thanks.
Over to CEO Wall for the role of council in this decision.
I'll pass that through to Director Houle.
Through the chair to Councillor Kerr, at this time, council has been asked to approve a variance. So the reduction of the setback facing Hubert's property. Council can require mitigation measures such as fencing and landscaping to help reduce the variance, but really the focus of council is on the variance. It's not about the look of the building beyond that face of the building, but really is there anything that can be done to reduce the impact of a reduced setback in this case? So Charlie will speak to some of the measures that have been taken to help mitigate the reduction in setback. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions? Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our second delegation will be Charlie Gore, Senior Manager of Capital Project Delivery for the Comox Valley Regional District. And this is on development variance permit for the Comox pump station upgrade. Nice to see you, Charlie.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for having me. My first time in the town council, so I'm excited to be here. I have a short presentation that thank you very much. You're going to pull up for me, and I'll just indicate when I'd like to go to the next slide. Does that work? Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So my name is Charlie Gore. For those that I don't know well, my role on this project is the project manager. So there's several different aspects of the scope, but it's my charge at CVRD to kind of be in control of the project. I know there was an acknowledgement at the start, but I do want to acknowledge that we're on the unceded lands of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. So I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the scope or the kind of journey of this project. So I'm going to do a bit of history before I get into the nitty-gritty details. The scope of the project you can see up on the screen here, where we're building a brand new Courtenay pump station over by the 17th Street Bridge. But the scope for the pump stations in both Comox First Nation and the town of Comox here are pump station upgrades. We're not building a new station, we're upgrading the existing stations. We are building a brand new force main that I'm sure everyone is very well aware of through the entire project. So the project timeline here, and I think it's important for this issue, is because we've been working through a very long process through the LWMP process, which includes a public advisory committee to guide the selections and the options as we've gone forward. And that resulted in a selection of the project scope in 2021, which was then refined in 2022 for the specific scope for the upgrading of the Comox pump station. Once we got our head around that scope, in 2023, we worked with the Sewage Commission to approve a motion to pursue these specific development variance permits with the town of Comox at that time. I know there's a long gap there, and unfortunately, working with town staff, we understood that until we've finished the detailed design, we're not able to go through that process. So I apologize for kind of coming to you at what appears as the 11th hour for those variances, but unfortunately, it's a bit of a part of the process that we had to go through with the planning staff. And then throughout 2024 was the detailed design that was able to bring us to this point. So the major constraints we have down here, and one of the reasons for the development permit variance, is that there's not actually a parcel where this infrastructure sits. So there's no fee simple parcel. It's just a series of right-of-ways that kind of transitions from your road right-of-way into the provincially owned estuary. But those overlapping right-of-ways, you can see shaded in green there to give you an understanding of kind of the area we have to work. And you can see in the hatched kind of stone, there is the bank that kind of protects from the estuary up to the flat area of the pump station. So it's a very constrained site that we have to work with. And Hubert, who just presented before me, is at the number 15 there. So as we got into the design, some of the parameters that we focused on was to utilize the existing infrastructure. Obviously, on these large infrastructure projects where budget is a main focus, but also trying to maximize the usage of usable life of what we're working with. We also have a major flood protection issue here with climate change and the potential for sea level rise and storm surges. We need to protect this station as it's a critical piece of infrastructure that needs to continue to operate if we have a major flood event. And then we also tied into very stringent seismic and electrical codes, which really refine what we can do. Some of the other design parameters and things we focused on was ensuring that there was no noise or odor issues generated from the expansion, maintaining safe access for our operators, and maximizing the screening vegetation. We'd also made a public commitment early on that we weren't going to increase the height of the facility. And that was very important because there's a lot of folks living not only at the street level, where Hubert lives just next door to the building extension you can see there, but up above the facility. And so it was a major focus of our design to make sure that we weren't creating a new nuisance or blocking the view of the field. So this is just the general scope of the extension, and I'll get into more details as I move through. But it is a building extension off to the east of the existing building there, and that is to house the new emergency standby generator. It has to be inside because we have to protect it from that flood event. The current power that brings into the sites provided by BC Hydro would be cut out in a major flood event. So the standby power is critical to keeping this piece of infrastructure operating. And then on the west side of the facility, at the top of the page there, is some new odor equipment. That's new equipment that's required because we're starting to take up the space on the site that is currently used through the existing odor system. So we need a new odor system that will ensure that there's no odor issues generated by the facility. One of the big focuses, once we understood that we needed this building extension, that the new generator couldn't be put inside the existing building, was minimizing the size of that building. And as you can imagine, we were trying to make it as small as possible. And you can see some of the, can I point at this? Oh yeah, it won't work on the screen. Okay. So the generator itself is so you can see that the building itself absolutely on the side houses that are right there, so inside the driveway. And actually work to minimize the water. That would be set out. Out by the way. It's extremely difficult to put this. If you not back here, the building is actually set back to the perfect part of the divided area. So that is the divided area work actually was square generated that is the reason for the building extension to be closer to the ocean as well. You can also see on the right-hand side there, it's an excerpt from the detailed drawing showing why we need a walkway on the front of the facility. The walkway is required so that we can get all the electrical boxes that are mandated by electrical code up above the flood level to make sure this system continues to operate in that worst case flood scenario while maintaining the electrical code height for operators to work with it. So we need to bring the people up to the electrical boxes. So kind of stepping back from the design a little bit, I wanted to touch on the engagement with the neighborhood. So back in 2022, when we understood the scope of the facility, voted by our sewage commission, we went out to the public to do a meeting to understand what was important to the residents. There was a public meeting and then a feedback letter, and that was handed through to the capital project team, to my team. But unfortunately, there was some commitments, follow-up commitments made that weren't followed through with. And in January 2025, so earlier this year, we went out to the public and said, hey, we're going to build this pump station. And we got a very firm response from the community saying, hey, you're not meeting your commitments, which I'm sure many of you heard about, and I apologize for that. And we sent an apology letter following up on that to the community. And that started a new engagement where we put out 4 architectural options to meet that previous commitment. And the neighborhood voted on those 4 options. And the option that was selected was option 1, which is doing a modern vertical charcoal siding on the building extension, which Hubert mentioned earlier. You can see there in the rendering there, you can see that pony wall that Hubert mentioned, which is this concrete wall that wraps around the bottom of the facility. This is a flood protection. Effectively flood-proof a standard metal cladded wall. We need a fully flood-proof concrete wall. Now, yes,
We're not allowed to have speaking from the audience, please, during the presentations. Thank you. Thanks, Charlie.
so that was part of the design that was put forward to the neighborhood. And at this stage, we've moved forward to detail design. We've submitted our detail design to the planning department for our building permit, and changing all those details costs money. And it may seem like a minor thing, but revising a full set of architectural engineering drawings is significant at this stage of the project. One of the reasons why the neighborhood may not have seen that in the renderings is it's only 1.4 meters tall. It's below all the fence lines. I do believe that, and you can see that the entire east side there is covered by cedar hedges, covering the visibility of that pony wall. And so to me, this is a very minor issue, which is one of the reasons I responded that we weren't willing to change it at this late stage. So this is my last slide. I don't know where I'm at with time, but so the variance request that we're requesting is that setback from the natural boundaries. That we're still working within our existing right of way. I did just want to speak to the 3 bullets that I heard from Hubert. If I've got 1 minute left.
Go ahead.
The differences in the detailed drawings between the detailed drawings submitted to the town for that building permit compared to the renderings that we voted on. I acknowledge there are some minor differences, and I have forwarded our back and forth to town staff. And I expect that through our building permit, we will make those same commitments that I made to Hubert into our building permit to make sure we're talking about locations of cedar hedges and things on a large set of engineering drawings. And so I see them as quite minor. I've already spoken to the pony wall, and the fence clarification was that in this rendering, see that we spend some time without sign architects trying to model exactly what this looks like. Our engineering consultant didn't do that, so they modeled Hubert's fence incorrectly. But again, it doesn't change the scope of what we're doing. We're just tying into that existing fence with our new palisade fence. But I want to clarify that we're not planning to remove the chain link fence on the ocean side of our facility. And that was never part of the scope, nor was it part of our engagement that we would change that. But we are removing and putting in a nice palisade fence that was voted on the public around all the visual parts of the facility. Thank you very much for your time.
We may have some questions, Charlie.
Of course.
if you don't mind Standing up there. Thank you. When was the original facility built?
1980. Well, at the original, there was a town pump station back from the 60s, but it was upgraded for the regional district facilities in 1980.
Questions from council while we have Charlie? Councillor Blacklock.
Can you just state again, I might have missed it, what is the height of the palisade black fence there that we can see in this design drawing?
Ooh, I guess it's a standard 6-foot fence.
Okay,
Is my
and the pony wall is 1.4 meters, which is times 3.28084 is,
It's less than 5 feet.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from council for Charlie? Okay, thank you very much. Our next delegation, we have Twyla Skinner from the Comox Valley Farmers Market Association to update us on plans for a farmers market in Comox, which we're very excited about. Welcome, Twyla.
Thank you very much. For those of you that don't know, my name is Twyla, and I'm the general manager for the Comox Valley Farmers Market. And today I'm here to provide some details about our newest market here in the town of Comox. But before I do that, I want to give a brief overview of the market itself. So the Comox Valley Farmers Market is a nonprofit organization rooted in agriculture. And our mandate is to promote and support the economic health of the local farm and food community and to educate the public on agricultural issues. The products that we sell at the market are made, baked, grown, raised, and wild harvested in the Comox Valley and Strathcona regional districts. And approximately 90% of the vendors reside within 20-kilometer radius of the Comox Valley exhibition grounds. So fun fact, when we're talking about food miles, which is the distance food is transported from the time of this making until it reaches the customers, is 20 kilometers, which is amazing. And at our proposed market here in the town of Comox, there will be vendors that are producing products in the immediate area. So this further reduces the food miles that we have. We are a food-only, farmer-first farmers market that operates in the Comox Valley for over 32 years. In fact, we'll be celebrating our 33rd birthday in a couple of weeks on May 2nd. Although we love our artisans and do support them in other ways, we do not have artisans at our market. And our membership is composed of 55 to 60% farmers, with the additional 40 to 45% as bakers, processors, concession herbalists, and the herbalist is the soap and body care products, and liquor vendors. We currently have 3 markets, one year-round market on Saturday. We have our summer seasonal market on Sunday, and new this year, we'll have our second summer seasonal market in the town of Comox. We participate in the BC Association of Farmers Market Nutrition Coupon Program, which feeds families, young families, pregnant individuals, and seniors across BC with fresh fruits, vegetables, meat, dairy, eggs, nuts over a 16-week period. Our community partners are Comox Valley Healthy Families, the Mikisew Métis Association, the Upper Island Women of Native Ancestry, and the Cumberland Community School Society. And they focus on pregnant individuals, families with children under 6, as well as some seniors. So here in the Comox Valley in 2024, we were able to help 225 families, which included over 690 individuals, which brought over nearly $84,000 to the individuals who are experiencing food insecurity, as well as farmers here in the Comox Valley. We also work with Lush Valley, and since 2018, we've been able to collect food after market that's not saleable, that could go to waste or put into the compost. And the purpose of this program is to increase the impact of local growers by supporting members in the community who lack food security or lack access to fresh foods while promoting local food production and reducing waste. So over the last 7 years, we've been able to divert over 10,000 pounds of edible fresh fruits and vegetables that would otherwise being composted or thrown out. In 2023, we participated in a BC-wide economic and community impact of farmers markets. This was in a partnership with the BC Association of Farmers Markets and UNBC. The combined estimated economic and community benefit of the Comox Valley Farmers Market on the local economy in 2023 was just over $8.2 million. When we break that down, the economic benefits are the direct benefits, so the amount that the customers spend at the market. We can use a multiplier effect to find out the ripple effect of profits from the vendors purchasing product and ingredients, seed, feed, that type of thing from other vendors and other stores within the Comox Valley. This also can include employment. As a conservative estimate, the multiplier is 1.5. And the community benefit is the spillover effect that the Comox Valley Farmers Market has on the neighboring businesses. So when a customer comes to the farmers market and they purchase their fresh fruits and vegetables, and then maybe they go to a local coffee shop or they go to another business, say to a bookstore and purchase books, that's the spillover effect. You can also use the same multiplier of 1.5. When you combine these numbers, that gets the estimated economic and community benefit that I talked about earlier. So on to the meat of the things. So we are proposing a Comox Valley Farmers Market on Wednesdays here in the town of Comox on June 25th, all the way to August 27th from 3 till 6 p.m. with a location at the Comox Community Center in the southern part of the field at the Village Park Field. Now, this is not to scale, it's not showing the exact rendering of what's going to happen, but just to give an idea of where our proposed activities will be. Our vendor lineup will consist of a mixture of farmers, bakers, processors, herbalists, which are soap and body care products, and liquor, and I'm hoping concession. I'm still working on that. Some of the products that we can expect are fruits and vegetables, small scale meat, chicken, eggs, baking, including gluten-free baking. We've got pretzels, ciders, hot sauce, indigenous wild harvested skincare products, soap, ginger drinks, chocolate, popsicles, and more. We are estimating about 10 to 15 vendors to start, although we've had a significant interest in the market, so the interest is growing, so hopefully we will get it up to closer to 20. There will be some seasonal variability depending on how weather goes and how the crops, etc., grow, but that's kind of what we're hoping for our first season. We're working on live music. We're working on funding to have live music at that market, as well as community tables. So what are we doing right now? We have talked to the local BIA to make sure we've got no issues or no conflict of interest or anything like that, and there have been no issues. Over the next several weeks before the market starts, we're going to reach out to the neighboring residents and let them know what we're doing, give some feedback on that. I mean, we're working closely with the staff at the community center to finalize details such as parking, weather contingencies, and other logistics. At the end of the season, after the market's over, we will return here to council and we'll give an update on the success of the season, including the number of vendors, the number of vendors residing in the town of Comox, the number of customers. And although we can't get the exact replica of the economic study that was done in 2023, we can give our best estimate because we collect data such as gross sales data and other information. We can get a pretty good estimate about what the economic impact of this market is on the town of Comox. And then we'll start planning for spring of 2026. We'll start getting ready for our next season. So before I end, I just wanted to say a big thank you that we're grateful for the town of Comox, mayor, council, and staff for their support at this market. The Village Park Field at the Comox Community Center is a perfect location for the market, and we're looking forward to a continued relationship with the town of Comox. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you so much. And I want to say, I know all of council is really excited. We've been looking for society or the right group to be able to pilot and start the market in Comox. So it's been on the table for many years, and it's great that you guys are here this summer. So thanks for sharing some of the details on it. Questions from council? We have Councillor Mayer.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to finally have a market in Comox. My only, well, and noting it's on Wednesdays, so I can stop by the market on my way to council meetings as can other councillors, which is great. I'm wondering, I'm thinking through the summer that youth will be looking like they might actually be pretty stoked to have something to do on Wednesdays. Do you have any specific plans for youth engagement or youth outreach?
We are always looking for volunteers to help run the market. So that's one way we approach the schools in the district just before school gets out. We know that some of the youth need volunteer hours. So we try and get them involved in that. There's potential that there could be some community tables as well, and the community tables can do some youth outreach there.
Amazing. One suggestion, if you haven't yet, is we do have a youth council that operates through the community center. So you could engage with them as a first step.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I can look into that.
Thanks for those suggestions, and that'd be through Ted. We have Councillor Blacklock.
My question is just about the location in the rec center field. Now, the rec center is a very busy place from hours 3 to 6 on Wednesday. We've got after school programs. We've got lots of exercise classes, we've got regular gym users. Is there any plan from the farmers market with the increase in traffic or parking problems in the area?
It's something that we're working on with community center staff to try and figure out the best way where we can park vehicles, the best way to handle traffic and traffic flow and how we're going to do all of that. So it's something that's in progress right now.
Quick follow-up. Just the only follow-up then is you said this was the perfect location. Which other locations were considered?
This was the main one, but we did talk to the BIA about locations potentially in downtown. We looked at other options, the marina and a couple of other places, but looking at the logistics of the whole and how to operate the market, this fit all of the boxes.
Okay. And last question, I promise. The token program. In exchange for giving up the space, to put on the market, besides the 50% local multiplier effect, spillover effect of local businesses, would be there any way to get tokens back for the town of Comox to distribute as we see fit?
Can you define what you mean by
Well, you have the token program, right?
Are you talking about the coupon program or are you talking
Yeah,
about?
sorry,
Because we do have tokens. So I wanted to make sure we have tokens and coupons.
I'm just saying, like, besides the obvious benefit of having this great market, and
Yeah.
I know it will be very successful. What else do the residents of Comox get back?
So we are working right now. We're still waiting to hear about the funding related to the BC Association of Farmers Market coupon program. So there are lots of residents within the town of Comox that do benefit from the program. Our community partners have clientele that reach across the Comox Valley Farmers Market. So it's not just, the Comox Valley. So it's not just in Courtenay. So there are lots of individuals within the town of Comox that the coupon program will reach. We're still uncertain at this point what this will look like. It's hinging on the government funding. And so we're still waiting to figure out. They have announced that there will be continued funding, but there are significant changes. Those changes, I don't know what that involves yet. So once we have a better idea, then we'll have more knowledge of what that can be.
Well, so I'm a little early with that. Yes.
And we're bringing fresh local produce to the residents of the town of Comox. We're increasing the food security for the town of Comox.
Okay, last one. This one's good.
Last
I
one.
promised I'd ask this one.
Okay.
You mentioned their live music.
Yes.
I have one simple request.
Okay.
Please don't amplify it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from council around the table? Thank you very much
Thanks
to
very
the Farmers
much.
Market Association for bringing this to us. And as the new provincial information comes out, if there's any advocacy that needs to be done upwards to our local MLA on any changes, please do let us know. We would love to work with you.
Thank you very
as we
much. We will do that.
Open the
Thanks.
market. Thank you. Okay, just a note, any delegations are welcome to stay for part of the meeting or after the meeting, but looks like some people know that, so you're welcome to stay for as long as you wish. The fourth delegation this evening is Mary Lou Moffett on behalf of Brook Place Strata for DBP 25-3 for 468 Pritchard. So I will welcome Mary Lou Moffett up. And for a reminder for council, 468 Pritchard is the subdivision that has a development variance permit this evening for the undergrounding of the BC Hydro line. And so that's what we would be discussing this evening is the variance on hydro.
Awesome,
So
thank you.
welcome.
On behalf of the 36 owners of Brook Place Strata 107 at 1537 Knoll Avenue, we would respectfully like to go on record as objecting to the development variance permit application DVP 25-3 for the proposed 3-lot subdivision at 468 Pritchard Road. A new hydro pole, which I'm told is being planned, would be placed on Elm Place with overhead wiring to the 3 new houses. This would increase the eyesore of the existing poles and wires already on Elm Place. There is a Comox bylaw 1261 Appendix G, Section 121, requiring all new buildings to have underground wiring, and we would like council to adhere to this regulation. We feel a developer can pass the cost of installing underground wiring onto the future homeowners. We will already be inconvenienced by the congestion of 3 new driveways on the Elm Place cul-de-sac, which will more than likely result in increased traffic and parked cars. Questions?
Thank you. That was very succinct and to the DVP. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions for Mary Lou before we come to that development DVP later on 468 Pritchard? Okay, and you were representing the whole strata complex. Is
Yes.
there something signed or letter or anything that is coming in with the delegation or just the verbal presentation?
I can certainly do that if you'd like.
It's tonight, the hearing's tonight. So I just wanted to make sure we had. the
Yeah, I
information
know
from
one
you.
resident did send in a letter, but I can certainly get something signed by all of the owners.
That's great. Your delegation is
Okay.
good. So no further questions from council. We have Mary Lou. Okay, so we'll be coming to that later on in the agenda. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so that's our delegations this evening. We have a little bit of time before the public hearing, so we'll be moving on to page 13, adoption of the regular council meeting minutes for April 2nd, 2025 for adoption. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We're moving on to council committee meeting minutes and reports. On page 18, we have the strategic planning committee meeting minutes for receipt for April 9th, 2025.
Second.
Any questions or comments on the strategic planning committee meeting minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to committee recommendations, we have tax rate bylaws 1 through 4. We can get a motion for number 1, that council approves the tax rate bylaw to be created with an increase in revenue of 8.94% for residential properties to the general municipal levy.
As much as it pains, second.
Number 1 has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on number 1? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Number 2, that council approve the tax rate bylaws to be created with an increase in revenue of 7.85% for business properties on the general municipal levy.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from council on the business property levy? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Number 3, that council approve the tax rate bylaws to be created with an increase in revenue of 7.85% for light industrial properties on the general municipal levy.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the light industrial property levy? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. And number 4, that council approves the tax rate bylaws be created with an infrastructure renewal fund of $103.46 to the average residential property on the general municipal levy.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the infrastructure renewal fund? All those in favor? Opposed? And that also passes unanimously. Thank you. So that is the tax rate bylaws. We are moving on to consent agenda on page 20. We have items 1 through 14. If I can get a motion to move the set.
Moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of receipt of the consent agenda? Opposed? And it's received. Are there any items 1 through 14 that council would like to pull out individually? You'll just need a seconder. Councillor Grant.
Can I pull out number 10?
Number 10, the request to not fund e-com. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, so I guess there's been quite a bit of discussion, certainly down in the Victoria area about e-com. We're not a part of that same group with our 911. And so this doesn't affect the Comox Valley. This is, so e-com gets a lot of calls in the southern part of the island because they take police calls as well as fire calls. And so their numbers were getting big. So they went to the province and the federal government and got help with the funding of that. I'm going to guess about 5 years ago. That now has come to an end and they have to renew that, and the province has pulled out. So they're not going to be helping fund that Southern Island 911 on their e-com. So that's why you're seeing all of this hoopla down there. The bill's going way up. We're not part of that, so it doesn't affect us. We have a deal with e-com now, but it's just for our fire services, and it covers mainly the North Island. We have a bigger region, but that's the reason why you're seeing it. Also, the province is doing an audit on e-com currently, so it's bringing it all to the table. But we don't have any of those issues in town. So I just wanted everybody to know that.
Any other questions or comments on number 10? Okay, thanks, Councillor Grant. Other items to be pulled out from council? Councillor Swift and then Councillor Haslett.
Thank you. I'm having trouble navigating this. It's Will Cole Hamilton's letter regarding the $30,000. Number 6. Okay, number 6.
Second.
Thank you. I'm just curious about this one, given it looks like it's a new program and it looks like it's going to continue every year. It's a relatively small amount, but I'm just wondering why it was done that way, and should it have been a service created, and how do we have any insurance about what the amount is going to be? So maybe some conversation around how the 30,000 was decided, and what the plans are going forward for that.
I'll likely go over to staff on this one, but yeah, it sounds like the dollar value is around 6,000 or 7,000, but some of the creation and what it could become is something we'll have to be looking into. CAO, do you have any update on if it was a brand new service creation or what it falls under?
So the services, or this function is under their general administrative service, function 110. I don't know the genesis of this, and I don't know how the $30,000 amount was decided on. That changing it would be the normal procedure for changing anything in that service, which would be a majority vote of the CVRD board.
Councillor Kerr, is it a comment in regards to? Perfect. Thanks.
Just to share some context, and Councillor/Director Grant can correct me if I misspeak on anything. I believe what the challenge was, like we've faced at this council, is how do you provide grants in aid when you get multiple requests? And so, like our council has received multiple requests over the years, we decided to set up a grant aid program, and we set funds to certain organizations that we have previously approved and plan to approve in the future. what CBRD did is the 30,000 number was just kind of what they had been giving out. And they said, why don't we do what Courtney does, which is just turn it over to the community foundation to manage the program. So the directors around the CBRD aren't picking and choosing winners and losers of the program. So 30,000 has been about what's been done every year. Let's not have the directors cherry pick their favorite charities to provide, or nonprofits to provide the funds to. Let's have a reputable organization like the Community Foundation do that program management on an ongoing basis. So Director Grant, if you have anything to add, feel free to do so if that's okay with the chair, but that's my recollection.
Sure, no, that's pretty accurate. I think that something that's been missed in this, though, is the fact that this could be raised at any time by a majority, which we don't have the majority there. So this could be 60,000 next year, it could be $300,000 a year after. And I think that we need to really look for a way, and I don't know if Jordan has one or not, to cap this so that we're not stuck at the bequest of other areas that have more power than we do and may have different goals. So I think it's a good idea what they've done, but I think we need to refine this and put some criteria onto as to how we're going to make this work. And I don't know if Jordan has a way to do that or not, but I think that's what you said.
Over to COL, but it sounds like we would maybe have to discuss with individual directors and see if there was some consensus on having a limit so that there's some understanding of where it can grow to. COL.
Yeah, so you could look to request the CVRD put in a policy saying that that amount won't change or will only grow at a certain rate without approval of 2/3 of the respondents or anything like that. With like any policy can be changed by majority vote of the board. Another way would be to request the CVRD put this in its own service. So I think those are maybe two different paths that you could take.
So if we want to get back to the RD on this, what would the right way to go? Should we send them a letter? Should we I'm not sure how to respond back to them to get this to be changed.
I'll go through to CAOL, but perhaps a letter from council that's agreed upon.
Yeah, if council wants to provide or wants to raise concerns around the decision-making, governance and future of the granting program within the service, I would recommend that you send a letter saying exactly that you're concerned around the governance, decision-making and potential growth of the granting program, and that you request that the CVRD provide some level of governance solution to your concern.
So would you want a motion now to do that, or since we got a motion on the table now?
There's no motion on the table now, and if this is something that if this is feedback council would like to give, then a motion would be needed.
Okay, so I would make that motion. We forget what you said there, because I was concentrating on what I was going to say, but I'll move what you said.
So that the town of Comox forwards a letter to the Comox Valley Regional District requesting. Give me 1 second here. Well, are you asking for more understanding, or are you asking for governance solutions or a cap? That the town of Comox forward a letter to the Comox Valley Regional District requesting governance consideration or cost controls for the future of what's the name of the service? The Regional Grant and Aid Program.
I'll move that.
Right, so that motion has been moved and seconded as read out by COL for Councillor Grant. Thank you. See Councillor Blacklock.
So here we are again in this uncomfortable position, right? We're in this uncomfortable position of trying to decide how to distribute money to organizations that all desperately need it. And it's frustrating for me to know that we went through the whole process of rewriting our grant and aid process. We came out with a cap of $151,000 this year. And here we are 2 meetings later, being asked to approve a regional program for another 30,000 with no power to stop it from going to 100,000 or 200,000 in years to come. So, you know, for me, it's frustrating because I think the people of Comox and the local government of Comox should be the ones deciding where the Comox taxpayers' money goes. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay, Councillor Mayor, did you have a comment? Okay, Councillor Kirk.
Just a proposed amendment instead of or, I'd suggest and or.
There's only one word in that whole thing. I don't know which one she's talking about.
Can we get that read back? As best you can. Okay. So
I think it can be and.
so what we're talking about when you say that is governance considerations, and currently it reads governance considerations and you want and or.
I thought it was or, so I thought and or.
Okay,
I think the intent was and when it got read out, it was for. I think if we do and or, we probably don't need to do a friendly amendment. It's almost exactly the same. And or.
I would ask for that to still be an amendment that council votes on, because that fundamentally will change what goes in there.
Okay, so I'll second the amendment. So that's just to have it, Councillor Kerr, do you want it to be and or and?
I'm gonna say and or because we'd like both discussed, but if we get one solved, like let's say the funding cap is solved, then we may or may not need the other, and vice versa. If the governance issue solved, then we don't have to worry so much with the cap. So they're kind of interchangeable or they're interrelated. So I think having and or makes sense.
Okay, so the amendment is, I'll second the amendment. It's to change it from or to and or for the description just given. Any questions or comments before we vote on that small amendment? Councillor Mayor.
It's not about, it's about the topic though.
So it'll go after the. Okay, any questions or comments on the amendment? Changing it from or to and or. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's unanimous. So now the motion has and or the governance considerations and cost controls. Councillor Mayor and then Councillor Blacklock.
It's just a point of clarification. This maybe for staff or for one of our CVRD reps. My impression is that this is not new funds for a new program. This is just a change in administration. Is my impression that this was the granting amount that was flowing through the CVRD already. They don't want to deal with the admin of it, so they're instead switching it to the community foundation. So can I just get confirmation that this is not new money?
It's a formalization.
Yeah. I believe you're correct, but we always get oversubscribed. And we had one group come to us last time and it was 30,000 and they asked for, I think, was it 60 or something? So, you know, the pressure to go up is there. So that's why we're trying to do this.
We have Councillor Blacklock and then Councillor Haslett.
Well, my only comment is, again, a lot of these monies are funding programs which, you know, outside of our grant and aid programs, which of course we've approved. Are they funding things that are by rights more of a provincial responsibility? And these are just more acceptance of downloading of cost to the local government level. We'll get some more clarification.
Councillor Haslett. I will just say we need to be wrapping up in about 2 or 3 minutes. So hopefully we'll be able to get to this vote and we will leave during the consent agenda. But Councillor Haslett.
Maybe it's a little bit more of a philosophical question here, but at what point do we need to really talk with the CBRD or maybe whoever directors can do it and just talk about how some of these services that we're in and how some of the money is spent needs to go into a service rather than just adjusting, say, a general line item budget? Because if it's just formalizing something, I can understand that, but it seems like not too long ago, we were having a negative conversation where
things were just slightly changing the service or majorly changing the service. And I just want to know at what point do we need to really send a strong message from the town to the CBRD that we need a little bit more control over how things are changing there. We can't just have current services changing a little bit to incorporate something because it seems like it's small. I don't know if that needs to go through staff or if that needs to come from the area directors or how it needs to go, but it just seems like the lines has started to get really fuzzy on where the money comes from or how the money comes from, and Comox is giving X, Courtney's given X. That part just needs a little bit more clarification. I think we just need to be a little bit more rigid on that. I don't know if there's a question there.
Yeah, it's kind of a statement. I think at the like leadership table, it could be discussed informally to kind of see if other people are having the same thought process. But Councillor Kerr as a director has his hands up. And again, we have another
Yeah.
minute or two and then we'll have to adjourn.
Just to, you can be rest assured, the message was heard loud and clear at the CBRD board that the majority of this Comox council is not happy with the governance process. Pulling out of 450 and not being in 451, the housing authority, the housing fund, and then the homelessness fund not being in either right now is a very clear message around the board. That's all I'll say now because we don't have any time, but there's no need to send any other message. Having a service review and it being pulled out, clear as mud.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. Any other questions or comments before we vote on the motion? Okay, so the motion is that council send a letter to the CBRD in regards to the, I'm wrong, governance and the cost controls for the regional grant and aid program establishment. And/or. We're comfortable with that wording, then we will vote now. Otherwise, we'll vote after. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. So we'll move for adjournment at 5:57 and go into the public hearing, and we will return to our meeting. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, we need to vote though. All those in favor of adjournment? Okay, so we'll be moving into the public hearing at 6 o'clock and we will return to the regular council meeting once the public hearing has adjourned. The public hearing is. Yeah. And please be back seated in about 1 minute because we're going to get started. We are calling the regular council meeting back to order at 6:25 PM. We are in the consent agenda. Are there any items that council would like to pull out from items 1 through 14, continuing on the consent agenda? Councillor Mayor.
Item number 11 about Brooklyn Creek.
Second.
I was just hoping to hear from staff a little bit of a response to the concerns that were raised about the trails and use around Brooklyn Creek.
We'll go through to CAO and just give them a moment to
11.
Yeah, thank you. I think that starting with the beginning of the letter where it's highlighting the important parts and the importance of Brooklyn Creek and its importance to both wildlife, aquatic and not, the town is in agreement with that. We have the town has invested significant funds to try and improve the fish bearing quality of the creek, to try and improve the slope stability, to try and improve it as a storm, its function as a stormwater system, and when it needs to function as a stormwater system for the town, improve the ability to do so without negatively impacting the environment in the area. We work very closely with the Brooklyn Stream Keepers to ensure that, or the Brooklyn Creek Stream Keepers, to ensure that we are doing best practices and managing it in the best way possible. Riparian area protection regulation is a little bit more nuance to it than simply preventing construction of formal trails. But we are continuing to meet provincial legislation and trying to steward what we understand to be a very, very important ecological asset within the town of Comox.
Thank you.
any other questions or comments on number 11? Councillor Blacklock.
Do we ever send bylaw down the trail, just look for unleashed dogs? Cause I mean, the dogs in the creek is happening. I mean, I run through there quite often and we see a lot of off leash dogs sometimes jumping in the creek.
Director Russell, do you know if that's part of the regular patrol route?
The Brooklyn Creek Greenway is not part of bylaws regular patrol route, but we can certainly add that to if council desires.
Bring that offline for discussion. Be challenging. Any other further comments on number 11? And if not, are there other items from the consent agenda council would like to bring out? Okay, I'm not going to bring any of the items out. I just want to point out there's 3 invitations in that lot of consent agenda. The Comox BIA AGM, which is on May 12th now. Note the slight date change for a date earlier. And Richard Hardy will be there as the guest speaker. So please RSVP by May 2nd. So there might be some little flexibility, but get your RSVPs in for the Comox BIA AGM at May 12th, 13th. And then there is also a invitation from Habitat for Humanity for a key ceremony, and the RSVP for that is this week, tomorrow, or Friday, sorry. And there is an invitation to participate in the annual McHappy Days, and that also has an RSVP date. So just note some of those invitations that came through in the consent agenda. Before I move on, is there any other items from consent agenda? Perfect. We're moving into unfinished business. We have the 2025 policing priorities. There's a short list there that council forward the following policing priorities to the RCMP for 2025 for Comox. Number 1, speed control. Number 2, continued presence in town, including evening checks at Marina Park. Number 3, continued support for wellness checks as needed. And number 4, cost-conscious municipal policing, considering rising service and infrastructure costs. Are there any questions or comments from council before we have a motion? Or is there a motion to send that off to the RCMP to open the conversation? Councilor Blackwell.
Just a quick anecdote, and I have forwarded this to Inspector Mercer, but we have a electric scooter in this town with a young man who rides it, who went past me on the dike, or sorry, on Anderton Road going northbound. I was going exactly 50 kilometers an hour, as I always do. And this electric scooter went by me and I clocked it about 70. Caught him at the light. I asked him, how fast does that machine go? He said 110 kilometers per hour. I said, please be careful. And I drove away. So this is, you know, these things are getting, they make me very nervous. So speed control, love to see it on that list. Thank you.
Before we keep having discussion, thank you for those comments.
Second.
Motion and seconded, moved and seconded. Thank you. Questions or comments on the wording or any of those items? We tried to capture our conversation. Is there any other adjustments before we send this to Inspector Mercer? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. There are no special reports. So we are moving on to bylaw adoptions on page 228. We have the Comox Affordable Housing Agreement bylaw number 20-40 for 1966 Guthrie Road for adoption.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the housing agreement for 1966 Guthrie Road building? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We're on page 270, the Downtown Comox Business Improvement Area Renewal, and that is for bylaw adoption number 2032.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the area renewal? All those in favor? I'm going to call the vote one more time. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And thank you for the members in attendance tonight from the Downtown Comox BIA. See lots of familiar faces. Moving on to new business on page 278, we have DVP 25-1 for the Comox Pump Station 81 Jane Place, which we heard from earlier. I'm going to go to Councillor Swift.
And thank you. I'm going to recuse myself, given I live in the neighborhood.
Thank you for that. And we will just wait a moment. Should we shut the door? No, we're good. Okay, just checking. No. We reject. Okay, so we have that development variance permit 25-1 be approved and further that administration be directed to issue the permit. This moved.
Second.
Seconded. This is of course in regards to the two delegations and presentation from CBRD we saw earlier. Are there any questions or comments on the DVP 25-1? Councillor Kirk.
I just want to thank Director Houle's comments earlier, just clarifying what we're deciding. Again, this is the DVP decision. The town's role is very limited in this. It's not having anything to do with design or color or height of fences or anything. It's simply approving the DVP so the building can be built. Thanks also to Mr. Gore for the presentation earlier, outlining and to the CBRD staff and also to all the residents that have been involved in the process. Just a big thank you. I know there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of time spent back and forth, and I hope the neighborhood is pleased with the end result once all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of DVP 25-1? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And I thank you to the CBRD for the community engagement that was done over the last couple of years and transparency on some of the glitches that we came back to having a solution met. Thank you so much. We will get Councillor Swift back inside. Okay, so we're moving on to page 360. We have DVP 25-3 for 468 Pritchard. And it is that development variance permit 25-3 be approved or The alternative to the recommendation that development variance permit 25-3 be referred back to staff for more information. And this is in regards to the undergrounding of the BC Hydro at that lot subdivision. Move
Second.
approval has been moved and seconded, and questions or comments from council. Councillor Hazlet.
And just confirm, if we're voting in the approval, that a pole would go in rather than sinking the power lines.
That's correct.
I just want to make a quick comment. I'm going to vote in opposition. I think it's important when we said undergrounding was required and granted the 3-lot subdivision that we maintain that requirement. I think we have those policies for a reason, and we've had other subdivision need to do them. So I think it's important to stick to that. And further to what the complex in the neighborhood said, that was an expectation of that development. So and they would have thought those comments would be done when that subdivision was done. Councillor Mayor.
Yeah, I'm also going to vote against this. I support the reasons for us undergrounding it, and I support the feedback from the community about the reasons for it to be undergrounded here.
Other questions or comments from council? Oh, that's Councillor Blacklock and Councillor Kirk.
I'll vote in favor of this resolution only because we have a affordability crisis when it comes to real estate in this province and in this town. And adding $100,000 to a 3-lot subdivision and saying, well, we'll just pass it on to the buyers is not something I would approve. Thanks.
Just over to staff. My understanding is it's not 100,000, but can we get that number clarified?
Maybe I'll pass it over to Director Houle, but my understanding it is about 100,000 to underground it and 10,000 to have the utility pole installed.
Okay, so
a difference of
30,000
about
per lot.
90.
Okay, so we're talking
Yep.
about 30,000 per lot. Same number, Councillor Kirk.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to vote in favor of this. I agree. It's really important to have strict standards and not change them unless there's a major exception. And I think this is one because the rest of the street has the poles. If this neighborhood had undergrounding everywhere, then I would say absolutely. Then this developer, this owner should continue with that plan for that street. But because there's already poles around all the other properties on that street, and it will not change. I ran by it a couple days ago. It wouldn't change the look of the street very much. And I agree with Councillor Blacklock's affordability comments that the price difference is just too high. And I think this is an exception worth making.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this has come up before and, from time to time, we've said we want them undergrounded, although I can't remember the last time we did that. But the cost of this gets astronomical for people, and it's stopped many people from going ahead and doing this. And I think that what we need to do is sit down one day and have a good discussion on how we want to go forward with this. I don't think we've got it right because they keep coming back and asking the same thing. So I think we should actually figure it out and get it in our bylaws correctly.
Thanks for those comments. And any other questions or comments from council before we vote on the motion? Okay, so, Councillor Mayor.
I'm actually going to change my position because I originally, when I read this, was fine with it. And then I was swayed as I listened to the community members, and I am back to feeling supportive of moving ahead because the poles are already there and due to affordability. So I'm switching back.
Okay, we will call the question so that development variance permit 25-3 be approved for 468 Pritchard. All those in favor? Opposed? That passes. Thank you. We are moving on to page 386, the official community plan update. We are going to have a presentation by Nancy Henderson. Yes. So we will have Nancy up and then we will get into the discussion around the table.
Would there be a way
Well-
to do the short-term rental thing before this, so that those people can go home and not sit through this if they want to?
Okay, with unanimous consent from council, we can move the short-term rentals item in front of OCP in case we get into some really long dialogue there. So I'll make the motion that we move the short-term rental item before the official community plan update. If we get a mover and seconder. Okay, moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay. So we are going to, thank you, Nancy, for your patience there. We're going to move the item of the,
I'm going to recuse myself, given, I'm an owner.
okay. So we've jumped over to page 465, PR 25-1, short-term vacation rentals, Comox zoning amendment bylaw number 18.53. There are 4 items there. Councillor Swift has left. So we will go to number 1, that Comox zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.53 be given 3rd reading. That's been moved and seconded, and questions or comments from council. I'm just going to go over to CAO Wall, possibly to Director Cool, on the question of the 17 municipalities that had an extension, if that would be required should this pass, or if what some of the metrics around that were.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. I was wading through the several press releases from the province, which took a bit of time. What I found is there was an extension for 17 communities, but it was an extension to those communities that opted into the legislation. So they were communities that they weren't subject to the principal residence requirement to start with. And then they decided to opt in, and it's those communities that have been given an extension. So it is something I can look into, and I can ask the question of the province, but my understanding is that we wouldn't be eligible for an extension, but I will inquire.
And should the bylaws pass or be adopted this evening, what is the timeline for people to be able to get their businesses within the provincial regulation? Will it be likely by May 1st, or can that be determined?
Yeah, we've already started taking, and we've already completed a number of the inspections that are required. I think you just need, we need the fire inspection, and does bylaw go there as well? It's just the fire inspection, correct?
Through the chair to CAO Wall, it would depend on the situation, the type of unit that's being used, but typically most of them will only have the fire inspector go.
So there's nothing, if your property is up to the code required by the legislation, there is nothing that would prevent you from getting a business license in time.
Okay, perfect. So that's just some clarification on some of the questions that were asked in the public hearing. We have Councillor Hazlitt and then Councillor Kerr, please.
Just confirm with fire and potentially bylaw having to go out to these properties to do inspections, do we have enough staffing? So
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Grant may have had his light on before me.
no, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to do a quick little synopsis here of where we've come, especially for those of you that have attended and have spoken tonight. I want to thank you for having the courage to speak in a public meeting, especially in council chambers. It's probably a little more intimidating. So I just want you to know, and if you haven't read the bylaws, please do. They're really good, and our staff has worked really hard on them. And if you haven't watched the prior meetings where we've had these conversations, please do. You'll see that this council has been really working hard, almost as hard as our staff, but not quite, to get this in time for you. So the province set these deadlines. We were all caught off guard, homeowners with units and our council and many councils across the province. But town staff and this council have been working diligently and have fast-tracked a number of the procedures to to meet the deadline and have you be able to meet the deadline, including, as we heard from the fire chief, already doing inspections previous to this meeting and has others lined up in our planning department who's been pre-processing before the deadline. So just so you know, if you haven't read the bylaw, all of the concerns raised today that I heard at the mic, this council has been working on and is addressed one by one. And I hope everyone that's listening to this, maybe not able to attend the meeting in person, can recognize that as well. And there'll be a pleasant ability to meet the deadline and continue to run your operation as you have in the past. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr, for clarifying that it has been on our radar for a good couple months now. We'll go to Councillor Grant and then Councillor Mayor, please.
Well, I just want to say he stole my piece of paper and read what I was about to say, so I know, I was trying to be nice, I won't do that again.
Councillor Mayor.
It's really just a question for staff and it's trying to figure out how to word it exactly. Just the level of confidence that we've addressed the issues so that the people who would like to continue participating in this can continue. Is there anything kind of outstanding that we haven't been able to get to? I guess is kind of my question.
Not that I'm aware of. What would prevent somebody who perhaps was operating in the past from being able to operate it now is if they don't have the required space that the province is saying that you have to. I think it has to be contained within a secondary suite. It's possible that people were operating them in non-legalized suites, and that's not going to be able to be done anymore. And that's the province, the way the province has set it up is to get municipalities to ensure that those regulations are being met through local business licensing.
Councillor Blacklock.
So my understanding of this from the province's perspective is they want to get more units in the longer term rental pool. Now, is there going to be any way for us in the town of Comox to track whether or not any of the units that no longer operate, that are today Airbnbs, that but for whatever reason cannot get a license from the town of Comox, are we going to be able to track how many of those actually become actual rentals for people?
So because the requirement is that secondary suite, if somebody is not providing was providing that space as an Airbnb, can no longer provide it because they can't meet the regulations and instead decide to do an unlicensed suite, we won't be able to track what happens there. We do have a number of, I would call them known or suspected unlicensed suites. And what we do when we find ads from people saying, rent this place, rent a secondary suite here, and it's not a regulated one, it's not a licensed one or a registered one, we send out the tax bills and notices saying we're going to charge you for the double utilities as if you had a registered secondary suite. And then if they don't, they will generally let us know and we'll go and do an inspection. So there's potentially a super roundabout way, but no, we won't be able to understand.
Okay, so we're on number 1, that Comox zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.53 be given third reading. Are there any further questions or comments from council? Councillor Kerr.
Just one last question for staff, just so it's clear. We as a council cannot do anything to upend or usurp the province's legal requirements for those non-conforming suites, correct?
Correct.
Thanks for that final question. All those in favor of third reading for 1850.53? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Number 2, that Comox zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.53 be adopted.
Moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Number 3, that Comox business regulation amendment bylaw number 1882.06 be adopted.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? And that's again around the $300 business license. No. Okay. We take that back. The Comox Business Regulation Amendment Bylaw number 1882.06 be adopted. Moved and seconded for a second time. Any questions or comments on number 3? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes. Number 4, that fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2016.07 be adopted. Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the fees and charges amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you to CAO Wall and Director Houle for getting this together for us this evening. We'll grab Councillor Swift back. Thank you. Okay, I'll ask Nancy to come back up for the start of the OCP presentation. Welcome to Nancy from Urban Systems. Do you mind just using the mic, Nancy? Sorry, I don't think it's on. It's not on.
There we go. All right, I should know that by now. We have an update for you on the official community plan project. So we have started the official community plan. Just before I do that, make sure I'm working here. Which is now a requirement of the Local Government Act from the provincial government that they all need to be updated by December 31st, 2025. And that official community plans also need to plan for 20 years of housing need, along with your zoning bylaw as well, which is also taking place on the same timeline. Council, I think, had all intention to update the OCP regardless, as it is from 2011 and getting a little long in the tooth, so to speak. In terms of the timeline, we, as mentioned, we're working kind of backward. We're reverse engineering this from being complete next winter. So we're looking for your direction this evening on a few items regarding the land use map. And some key approach philosophies of council that they'd like us to take. And then we'll go away and essentially draft the document for council to come back in June. And then also go into public consultation with coming back to council again in the fall for further consideration of the direction of the OCP. It is critical to get your direction at this stage because we don't have a lot of slack, let's say, in that timeline to do major revisions later on. So your feedback at this time is really important. As you know, the OCP is a very foundational document to how the town does business, and it really guides, in particular, land use and development in the community. It does have a number of other policies that are also important and guiding, but the day-to-day sort of use of the OCP is most frequent with development applications. So we are taking direction from Council's strategic plan in terms of the direction of the OCP and then other master plans that have recently been completed. So there's a bit of a sort of symbiotic circular relationship between the documents. One thing that's really important and often confusing to members of the public is land use designations in the official community plan versus zoning in the zoning bylaw. An OCP land use designation is like the guiding document. Zoning, you'll see all zoning must be in alignment with the OCP. That's future zoning coming before council must align with the OCP. Otherwise, you need to do both an OCP and zoning amendment. If there's existing zoning out there that doesn't align with the OCP, that's okay. Basically, what it does, though, if someone wants to come in and zone the land, then they don't need to do an OCP amendment because it's in alignment. So that's something to think about. You can also be pre-zoning lands as well, which we'll be talking about a little bit today, a little bit more at length, because that's where you're streamlining the whole process. There's a lot more certainty for the development community to come in and do those types of development. So it's important to do that for that type of development you really want to encourage. And ideally in areas where you have infrastructure and services to meet the demands of that development, because you take away that zoning discretionary power of council that you have to ask for a number of conditions of development. So things to think about. So just a quick update on the zoning bylaw. It is happening in parallel to this process. So as mentioned, it's very key to the implementation of the OCP. And really it does help provide certainty. It can encourage what you want to see, but it can also discourage what you don't want to see. So if you're seeing certain types of uses, for example, in your industrial area that don't have a lot of employment value, you can take those uses out of the zone and then have the uses more, say, employment intensive uses that you want to see, as an example. So the zoning bylaw update that's also underway, we have some sort of fundamental key items that we're trying to look at. Is we want to obviously do it in alignment with the OCP project. We want to identify and address key challenges identified by the community to like streamline development or correct interpretation issues, commonly requested variances and so on. And we want to make sure that it's clearer and simpler to work with and that it reflects modern best practices. We also want to make sure that it's compliant with new legislative requirements, including the 20 years of housing needs and already compliant with SHMU, which you did in June. In terms of just one, I think, key point here is the need to meet the 20-year housing need by Bill 44 by the province. So you need to meet that housing need in your OCP, and then you need to pre-zone to meet that housing need in the zoning bylaw. In terms of the vision and guiding principles, we have been working on doing a significant amount of engagement with the community. Last fall, we did a survey, numerous social media posts, website updates, and so on. And then just at the beginning of April, we had 4 focus group meetings as well, specific policy areas of the OCP. We had an amazing response rate on the survey of 422 people. 2,500 people interacting with the website as well, looking for additional information. And with that information, we did develop feedback. We had feedback regarding the community vision, and a large proportion of the community that responded to the survey did support the existing direction. There was some areas that were identified for potential improvement. So coming up, we'll show you like how we've amended the vision to reflect council's previous direction and input we received from the community. One of the other questions that we did ask was regarding sort of areas of importance and key policy areas typically covered in an OCP. And you can see, probably not surprisingly, as it keeps coming up in many focus groups, but parks and trails is very important to the community. But future land use planning also ranked very high. And thirdly, transportation, roads, connectivity, and parking was another key theme. So with the input, we took the old vision from the public and also from one of our first meetings with council and did an update to the vision. We'd like to get council's direction through the recommendations in the report at the end of the presentation, just regarding council's support for the vision and willingness to endorse it in the draft. And then this will also be sort of the hierarchy of direction from council in terms of how we further carry out the policy and the plan. And then in terms of the guiding principles, again, I think one of the key areas of focus is to create simplicity in the document. The existing document has 10 community values and 23 planning goals, and we've kind of narrowed that down to 9 guiding principles. So we would also like council to take a look at those and just to confirm that we're on the right track with the sort of highest of level guidance with the OCP. And then in terms of the provincial legislation, I think the key takeaway here, and I know you've seen this number several times before, but the OCP does need to meet the 3,358 projected housing units for Comox within the 20-year period. So we've also going to be approaching you just in terms of the approach to this and achieving the intent of the legislation. As council knows, Comox has a lot of development applications already in stream or close to adoption. And we've also been utilizing the provincial's projections regarding the SHMU housing or the 4-unit housing. Doesn't necessarily have to be a 4-unit, but additional infill housing. Quite honestly, that projection is quite high, and we're certainly not seeing the uptake this year. It's tough times out there for viability, but hopefully in the future, those numbers go up. So when we talk about like minimal approaches in terms of minimal pre-zoning, if you don't have that uptick in SHMU, for example, it's going to be really hard to meet these numbers. Or if a particular developer doesn't move forward with the project that you think they will, or as dense as you think they will, it'll be hard for council to meet those numbers. So we'll be talking a little bit about some more like flexible approaches. I think one of the key things here is, I think we've covered the OCP zoning connection fairly well, but the development permit areas are also in the official community plan as well. And that's something we're going to come back to you with much more detail in June. But we did take direction received from council and the development community in our initial drafting to really narrow down the number of development permit areas and again, simplify and make them clearer. And we'll come back with a draft for council's review. In terms of one of the key recommendations in the report before you is to get some initial direction from council to guide the approach to the OCP. And the approach that we've sort of taken is looking at having we've used the word flexible here, and I'd like to recoin it if possible as more visionary versus conservative. So a more visionary approach going, if Comox developed maybe beyond that 20-year thinking, that 50-year thinking, developed in the way that you wanted it to, putting those land uses on the map so that if someone has an idea that wants to achieve the vision of council, that they don't have to go through an OCP amendment. So you're making it a little easier and a little more clarity of what you want to see into the future. The more conservative approach would just be essentially taking like that minimal number of housing units of 3,358 and kind of changing land uses on the map. The existing OCP that you already have does have a more visionary approach. So I think it's not a big change based on the recommendation of staff. There's already some flexibility incorporated in the existing document. And then in terms of medium approach to pre-zoning, that's where you're pre-zoning more lands than the 3,358. And what we would recommend, and this would be again, future discussions in June, is that pre-zoning would occur in areas that maybe have good servicing or reasonable servicing or planned servicing through development cost charge or capital projects, as well as areas or types of developments that you don't have a lot of. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in terms of townhouses. You don't have a lot of missing middle. So to encourage that type of development, pre-zoning would add certainty and clarity to the development community, which right now, the viability of townhouses is sort of marginal. So that would really help reduce risk. And if you reduce risk, then you don't necessarily have to have as much profit margins. So that's another thought. In terms of the high pre-zoning, I would say it's like a less targeted approach. It's more probably less complete communities where we're really trying to focus development in certain areas, and maybe harder for the municipality to finance because you have a lot of development opportunity out there, but you don't necessarily have the infrastructure. So the recommended approach is sort of the visionary OCP, if you will, with the medium pre-zoning. One area that when we come back in June, and that we'd like to just get in council's minds and for consideration, and if you have any initial feedback, we'd really appreciate it. But in your housing stock, there's very few missing middle developments when you look at the complete picture. The SHMU zoning could help with that for sure. You've got a lot of building permits. You can see, especially on the CMHC completions, like a very large percentage of that is in apartments. Right now, the best viability in the foreseeable future is more apartments where there's like MLI select and funding through the federal government. But in that townhouse, family sort of style, housing option that where they can't afford that single detached anymore, there's not a lot of options. So that's one area we might recommend seeking out for pre-zoning. Now, in terms of the land use map designations, we are really looking for council's consideration and endorsement to take this forward for additional public engagement once we have the draft set up in June. One thing I would like to just note before we get going on this is that the land use designations are draft for public review. That's the goal that we want to put forward in June. If council is not sure, you're better to stick with like a higher density to go to consultation than change your mind later and going from like a lower density to a higher density. So maybe err on the side of higher density because that's generally where there's more community concern than the other way around. So it's just something to think about. In terms of the designations, again, sort of streamlining the number of designations from the existing OCP to what we're proposing in the draft, but having ground oriented residential. And the big change here from the existing OCP is this would include like infill or SHMU type housing, but also townhouses. And potentially if council supports 3-story apartment buildings. So it's like the lower height infill development. This would encourage, it doesn't mean like I think some 8,000 lots that are zoned R1 can just go ahead and start building townhouses or 3-story apartment buildings. That's where if you're not pre-zoning, council would have that discretionary power of zoning to determine is that the right location for that. But that's just something that would make it easier and someone wouldn't have to do an OCP amendment as well. So also trying to reduce the administration associated with those changes. And then so we've got a low rise residential and mixed use. So there's actually 2 different designations that's combined here. But those are essentially buildings that are up to 4 stories in height. And the mixed use would essentially allow for commercial or industrial. Zoning would further regulate that. It doesn't necessarily mean it could be 50-50. It could be a very small component of the building that's mixed use, depending on the direction we receive from council. Mid-rise residential and mixed use. So this is something a little new for Comox in terms of the buildings would be allowed to be up to 6 stories. Again, further regulated through zoning. And then in terms of the mid-rise residential designation, it's limited to residential use, but could permit commercial childcare use, or that would be written into the designation. And then the mixed use would permit, again, the residential, commercial, and institutional uses. The key area in the land use map, which we'll point out shortly, is in downtown Comox and fronting Comox Avenue. And the thinking for this was it's a priority area for development. When you're in buildings in 4, 5, and 6 stories, right now, the market viability of those developments is much higher. We're finding in most of the work we're doing around the province, the viability in that 3 and sometimes 4 stories, the viability is a little bit tougher. So if council wants to see downtown development and vitality in the near future, you may want to consider a little bit higher height building. So we wanted to put that out to council. In terms of the draft map, this is included in your report. I'm going to zoom in on the next slide, but before I do, because we'll sort of cut off CFB Comox and Kai Bay. Kai Bay, there's no real change there. It's the only area of the community that's left detached residential to support the town's continued lobbying to keep that area permanently exempt from SHMU. So that might be something, that we might have to address later, depending on referral comments. And I'm now just going to zoom in to this map because it's easier to see and what we kind of consider like the urban containment area of the core of Comox. Just in terms of, I'd like to point out, and I don't think this world does. there's three kind of key areas I just wanted to point out, and we do have a slide that we've inserted, but this map was developed in consideration of, council direction, lots of work with staff, Randy and his team, work with the development community and responding to the public engagement via the survey under the Complete Communities project, where there is a lot of specific questions in around two different scenarios. So this map, this land use plan does represent trying to incorporate and implement the complete community findings. So we can talk a little bit about that, but that has a lot to do with sort of a transit orientated land use format around Route 1. I also like to talk about the downtown area. We'll have another slide that illustrates side by side, but the downtown area has been somewhat expanded from a mixed use perspective. And then we've also got those higher medium density buildings of the 6 stories spanning out further along Comox Avenue. And we'll talk about that. And then the third area, further to council's strategic priority to increase the amount of industrial land in the community. We've proposed an expanded area on Pritchard Road of the industrial park. And that's another item that's been pointed out in the council report to get a feeling on council's support for that, or if they want to peel it back a little bit. So we'd be looking for that direction as well. So in terms of the complete communities, there was, we're basically meaning like we have a more walkable community. People can access daily needs. They can get to work. There's transit options beyond the vehicle or connectivity through walking. So we completed a great deal of geospatial analysis last year. Essentially this, the findings of that study have been really incorporated into the land use plan to date. We've also incorporated the survey responses regarding the complete community scenarios and incorporated those into the plan. In both scenarios, quite often, what people liked and didn't like were completely opposite of each other if you look at those things. So I think there's probably some division in the community, but we've done our best to address it. So when we're looking at them side by side, you'll see that a lot of the density around Guthrie, Anderton, and Comox Avenue does reflect like the dark green areas on the adjacent map, which is the daily needs map. So the areas that people can walk to in 5, 10, and 15 minutes is where we're also proposing the greatest amount of density, if you will, in terms of the land use designations. When you look at sort of the central Comox area where the map on the right has more yellow, that's where there's a little bit further to get to your daily needs. We've also popped in a couple small nodes in the purple. There's one that's already there, just down the road a bit from Highland. But we've created another little purple node right across the street where it could be more like neighborhood commercial, for example. And then another right across from Highland Secondary. Further to like additional review just this afternoon. And again, like this is something that council may or may not want to consider, but next to the academy, the old Brooklyn school, there's a few brown land use designations on the map for the low density apartment area that could be flipped to mixed use if council was concerned that there wasn't enough sort of neighborhood commercial nodes. You're kind of walking a really fine line, and then you'll have to really choose the zoning very carefully, because a lot of times like the viability of those businesses is really tough. So that's just something to think about, but I knew that was an issue that could potentially come up, so I wanted to draw it out. In terms of downtown Comox, you can really see how the area has expanded in size. These are slightly different scale maps. But you can see the commercial, so it doesn't show up too well, but the commercial area in purple on the right-hand side is larger than the red downtown Comox area in the previous land use plan. So there's expanding into some additional areas. And then same when you're looking at the mid-rise residential. So the more 6-story building height, apartment form typically also is expanded further, I guess, uphill from Comox Avenue as well. and slight changes on the sort of Balmoral side and towards Pritchard as well. So there's definitely an increased area, and the idea of that is sort of based on the downtown strategy and also looking to create more body heat downtown. So you'll have more vibrant businesses, and then that additional density hopefully would encourage and facilitate redevelopment, which is hard if it's not viable. In terms of the business park, which we discussed, the idea is this would be like light industrial and commercial uses that would benefit by being close to the airport, potentially support CFB Comox as well as just employment in general in Comox. And even having uses, and you can see this in a number of municipalities across BC, where you'll have an airport and an industrial park surrounding, but it would also potentially allow for uses such as like hotel and things like that that support that sort of continued growth of the airport. There is in the area that's proposed for business park expansion, there are some environmental sensitivities and stormwater management sensitivities as well. And then it's also an area that could provide employee housing opportunities for the airport, CFB Comox, and just in general in the community. And they're very like larger undeveloped sites, which the town does not have its funds left. So that's another consideration for council. But based on council's strategic plan, the idea is increasing the employment land base. And the economic development strategy did identify an additional 26 hectares of industrial land for the town of Comox. And that area was one that came to mind for potential expansion. We've also noted in our likelihood of redevelopment analysis that we did as part of the complete communities that there's also a lot of existing industrial land that's very underdeveloped. So through strategic zoning, potentially council could also encourage the redevelopment of other industrial properties as a parallel option to reach your overarching goal. I think in terms of what's in your council report, it does illustrate the employment lands expansion area being 13.3 hectares, but further to a meeting with Simba Developments, which did accurately point out that much of that parcel, roughly 6.9 hectares, is undevelopable. So you'd want to consider that it's actually bringing you far less closer to your overarching goal than that 3.3 hectares. And then this one particular property, just in conversations with Simba, I believe this is owned by someone else, but they have also noted that potentially that one site there to extend the business park into 2 parcels, but that one site could potentially be for residential housing as well. So in terms of the next steps, we'll take council's direction tonight and incorporate that into the draft OCP. We're aiming for a presentation of the draft to council in June. And then based on council's direction and the number of revisions, we'd like to get out to the community to sort of launch the public review of the draft. And then once it's also being updated based on council's direction, we can send it out for referrals to sort of get an early indication of feedback from partners and referral organizations and agencies. And then we do plan on, like, as mentioned, launching the draft with the public via an open house and other means of engagement over the summer. And then we will come back, we'll take a look at what's being said and consider potential revisions and recommendations to revise the draft, and then work on a second draft that we'd come back with for first and second reading with council. And then at that time, you'd schedule a public hearing, as an OCP does require a public hearing, and then move forward from there. And we'll be taking the zoning bylaw in parallel and also coming to you in June to kind of illustrate the direction of that particular document and get some additional direction. So at that time. So that concludes my presentation, and we have the recommendations from the board for council consideration.
Thank you, and we will just have time for questions now, since that was a thorough presentation. We have Councillor Haslett.
Thanks very much. That was very detailed. I've got a few different questions.
If you want to do two, and then we'll look and see what other questions we have, and we'll come back to you.
Okay, so my first question has to do with the employment lands. Obviously, there's some pretty major environmental concerns down there. We just saw up in the Hector Aspen area how the province stepped in as well and changed some buffers in that. In the Night Road slide, you have the 3 different zoning maps on it. It showed one was the current OCP, one was the potential, and then one had, yeah, there it is. With that shaded out section in the 3rd map, in the event that we turned that all into industrial land, which we all recognize is a huge tax base, not a really good opportunity for us. If we went and said, okay, this is all going to be industrial land, and it turns out that that's undevelopable, does the province just step in and say, you're not going to be able to do anything with this? Do you just, should we get it in our minds right now that that's not going to be usable and we should just not even think about touching it? What would be kind of your thought process on that?
Through the chair, if you're referring to the 6.9 hectares in red on the right, I mean, this is coming from the Northeast, the Comox Stormwater Management Plan. You know, it's likely not to be developable, but once you get into the site specific or rezoning application, you know, that's when you're going to get into that detail. That's the hard thing about OCPs is you're kind of up here and, you know, you don't want to be in the clouds so that you're being realistic, but you can't get into site level details. Otherwise you'll never finish. But I think it would be when council's considering this, I think you need to recognize that that 13.3 hectares is misleading and that there's a portion that's but still you do have over, you know, 6 hectares that you could put into the industrial potential.
And then my next question is, so we've obviously got CFB's got some big plans going on here, and we've got the 3,358 smooth and or sorry, 3,358 doors that we're supposed to be building. How much of that is the smooth? Yeah, that's it. Of the 3,358, how much of that is anticipated?
The 20-year projections for SMOO based on a provincially endorsed report was 1,500. So, you know, very significant number, and that could comprise, you know, secondary suite additions, carriage homes, duplexes, triplex, or 4. So it's not necessarily all 4 unit. So breaking that down, that's 75 units a year. So right now, you know, we're not seeing those numbers for sure. There's times where it's marginally viable right now as well. So, you know, when housing stock ages, those numbers may go up significantly, but right now, you know, it's pretty tough. So I don't know that I'd put all my eggs in that basket.
Tried to link CFB. So I'll wait.
Over to CAO Wall, and then we'll go to Councillor Mayor.
Yeah, just on that, with the methodology put out by the province, we are able to put that 1,500 projected into our required unit zoning, whether or not those develop, correct?
I think that it's defendable considering we're using a report that they commissioned.
We have Councillor Mayor.
I do have follow-up questions about this, but I'm going to prioritize 2 other questions. And hopefully we'll have time to come back. So my first question is kind of about neighborhood nodes and that idea of bringing complete communities to complete neighborhoods, which I think has been around as kind of best practice concept for a really, really long time. I live a 30-minute walk from town, downtown, and there is some, what is that zone? What is pink called again? Low-rise mixed, which is awesome, but guess what went in there? Medical. So we still don't have a coffee shop or like we can't just go grab, some milk or veggies or whatever within walkable. So there's two questions wrapped up in this. One is I know that our neighborhood isn't the only one that is a 30-minute walk from town. So is it possible to have more nodes understanding? It's not like I'm thinking micro, like, and it's partly is that I'm super entrepreneurial and love the idea of the neighborhood corner store, the revival of the neighborhood corner store with a little coffee shop, having those kind of public spaces, those third spaces that like we really don't have anymore. I would love to see that fostered through the OCP. So my question really is like, what would be the limitation? And also how can we encourage getting the kinds of businesses in there that enliven those neighborhoods rather than it just being endless medical, not that there's anything wrong with medical businesses, but just that we want them, just that we want them in certain areas more than maybe in others.
Through the chair, I mean, there's definitely the possibility through zoning to limit the specific neighborhood commercial type use to, the types of uses that you want to see. And, that's really where the sort of power in zoning is. I mean, the OCP, you could also like create another designation specifically for neighborhood commercial as well. Or you can be more broad and then use the zoning to really pinpoint exactly what you want to see, which would be my suggestion because trends change. And sometimes it is like I've been in areas where they have the neighborhood commercial and it's really hard, to make it work. So you have to be careful with them, but if someone's willing to do it, keeping the door open for them and that entrepreneurial spirit, they're great to see.
So could it work to identify, I was kind of expecting to see the circles overlaid with this so that I could feel more equipped to make kind of comment about the land use, but is that something worth considering? I appreciate that you brought up the heat map, I'll call it. It's still not exactly the circles that I got accustomed to. So
Through the chair, I mean, just based on the timing, we weren't able to do that, but in time for June, if it was something that council wanted to see was a node that was within 15 minutes of, the majority of town. We could take those two nodes that we've already put on and then maybe even the third if council wanted to see that be added, then your coverage would become much greater. And then providing also the flexibility in the land use designation, to support that.
Planner with Urban Systems. I work with Nancy. Yeah, no, all good. So the map on the right, the daily needs map. One thing that's pretty cool about that one is it's based on the walkability network. So when you have look, the circles are great, but they sometimes don't tell the whole story of like maybe there's a cul-de-sac and you actually have to walk up, back, and around to get down. Or maybe there's a trail connection that does provide that connectivity. Then this map kind of just goes one step further, but there might be a way that we could overlay it onto the land use map to make it a bit easier for that cross analysis.
Just a follow-up question on that, because obviously it would have to be something that council decides is a priority to have added to the map. Is the timeline for that addition would be feedback from tonight, or is there still time for council to have that discussion?
So maybe I'll answer that. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so that's exactly correct. These are the type of things we need council direction. If council wants to look for us to add additional commercial nodes out into, when you take a look, you can see the heat map. It's eastern Comox, both on the north and south ends that are missing those areas. So if council wants to provide us direction to go and take another look to see how we can add that into the map, providing that direction today or at your next regular council meeting so that we can prepare and do the work going into the consultation in June would be great. I would say if you want it done, ask us today. If it is something you need to go and take away, our next regular council meeting on the 7th is when we'd be looking for final direction.
Okay, thank you for that. We have Counselor Grant and we have Counselor Blacklock.
Yeah, thanks. It's interesting you bring up that piece of property by your house there. I was a realtor back in those days when Farmer Construction bought that, and they had those plans, exactly what you wanted. There's not enough housing in that area to support those businesses. He had it on the market for 5 years, and then he finally rezoned one of them and got rid of it. And the only person that would take one was a doctor. So it goes to your point that it's really, you know, when you're doing this, you got to be really careful where you do that. It's the reason why we don't have it everywhere, is because it's really tough to do. I mean, John's sitting there, he was the ECDF guy at the time. He can probably tell you all the numbers if his memory's any good. But so that's a really tough, you know, that's a really tough one to start getting into, I think. And you got to be really certain that you've got enough density around it to make it pay. But that wasn't what I wanted to talk about anyway. I'm interested in the employment lands out by the base, and I look at some of those properties, and you know, I have a really hard time with the colors because I can't see them very well. But as you look in that middle map, and I think it's Martin Haig's property there at the end, by the time you knock 6 acres off the back, there's very little property left on the front that anyone would put anything industrial on. It's really not that big for what you would want to do. And I think it might be way better to have that as a some sort of a housing piece to make that work. Now, I know that that becomes troublesome because we want to add more acreage, and I'm not sure where you do that, but that whole area is a real problematic area. Not to mention that you've got the pond down below, and the pipe goes through Martin Haig's property. So if you do what you're talking about doing, he could easily say, no pipe going into that through my property. And then I don't know what you do. So I know that's getting a little into a little more detail than you were hoping for, but I think there's some real challenges with that area that it seems to me that some mid-rise housing might be a really good fit for some of those places. I'm also concerned about the amount of SHMU that we're counting on for this. I mean, how many have we had built since that started? I think I can think of 3 or 4. But you know, when you came the first time, you talked about 40 a year. Well, we're not, even if we got 40 a year, we would only be halfway there. And so I think we may be trying to rely on the wrong tool here. Like, I know that the public isn't going to like when we rezone for higher density everywhere around town, but I think to meet these numbers, which I also think are way too high for us, if we want to reach those numbers, we're going to have to do a lot more than just a bunch of SHMU and a bit of this and a bit of that. I think we're going to really have to go higher density in a lot of areas. And it concerns me because, you know, I look down here and you want to put, you know, you're talking 12 stories on the waterfront and nine stories over here. You know, as a guy that's lived in this town forever, I don't want to ruin this town by doing stuff like that just to keep the province happy either. And you know, I also look at, like in Courtenay, they built 500 apartment buildings down on the bottom of Ryan Road. Well, the vacancy rate jumped up over 4%. We were at under 1%, and that little amount jumped us up to 4%. At some point, people quit moving into these apartments because people quit building, because you can't have, like, 3% is a good vacancy rate. 4% is getting a bit high. 5%, you're probably outside the limit of anybody building anything, as far as I know. And so, you know, I'm really concerned with how this is going to go for our community, because I mean, you know, I kind of like most of your plan. I don't like what you've got on Knight Road there. I think that needs to be changed, but I can see some real problems as we go. And I don't know what happens when we can't hit the number, because I can see that happening really easily as well.
I think there's 2 different considerations with the Housing Accelerator Fund. There may be some considerations if we don't hit the doors, but I believe we just have to have the housing zoned for. So that's CAO.
Yeah, that's correct. And then I feel like council's getting into the point where you're ready to discuss with each other. Maybe we just check and see if there's any last questions for Nancy, and then time for, oh, never mind, I was wrong.
We're doing a little bit of both, it seems like. So we'll stick around the table to questions for Nancy, and then we're going to be getting into a lot more discussion and potentially questions through staff. But while we have Nancy standing in front of us, we have Counselor Mayor had a point. Okay, we have Counselor Blacklock, then Counselor Hazlet.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask one question, and it's just around the idea of employment lands. Now, for years in Comox, we have had multiple goals to increase the amount of lands that are in tax classes 5 and tax classes 6, light industrial and business. And you know, when we look at the current map, that pink color on the far left, that is aeronautical industrial today. So it was originally zoned that way to attract businesses that would be related to CFB Comox operations, i.e. aeronautical contractors and the like. So what's happened since 2011? Well, we haven't seen any aeronautical contractors take advantage of that favorable zoning. So we failed in terms of motivating or encouraging development in this area. And now we all know there's many reasons for that beyond just the zoning. But my question is, we talk about pre-zoning land to create a favorable situation for the town financially. But what I'd like to see, and my question revolves around pre-zoning. You know, too many times in the industrial zone, we see in the last 10 years are a perfect example. What do people build? What is the number one permitted use that we see in industrial zones? It is self-storage. It is warehousing. Those are businesses that are great and they're very profitable for the owners, but they employ almost no people. There's no actual business beyond just the storage. So if you were going to pre-zone our employment lands for maximum attraction of businesses that employ people, what kind of permitted uses would you use?
Maybe I'll just jump in on that one. So we have taken a look at that and to your point, do understand that when we get into making the changes in the zoning regulations, we do have a targeted to take a look at our industrial uses and make changes. It will be presented to council to remove mini storage from the allowable uses in those areas.
We have Counselor Hazlet and then back to Counselor Mayor and Counselor Kerr.
My question is around the guiding principles, and this is the time to ask those questions and maybe make changes or no.
If it's to make changes, more specifically, we would wait till discussion, but if you have a question. Okay, thank you. We have Counselor Mayor and then Counselor Kerr.
I'm very curious about why there isn't higher density on our major arteries. Why it ended up being the highest density is on Comox Ave, and I expected or anticipated that would have been more along Guthrie and particularly at big nodes like Guthrie and Anderton and Comox Ave, and well, it's more so at Comox Ave and Anderton, but why not more density along Guthrie?
Through the chair, I mean, there's a couple reasons. One was council's direction regarding the Aspen Hector height. The recent that's, I don't believe it's even been adopted yet, or if not, it's getting close. That's one. Two, there's the aeronautical height restrictions. That's another. And then also really trying to create, you know, that viability downtown and knowing that we were probably like pushing it in council's consideration to go to 6. But if council wants to see increased height, happy to take that direction and make those changes. One thing I think we should also speak to is Anderton, and that there's, you know, the 4-story apartment building for most of Anderton, and then there's some mixed use in those hubs. But the purpose of not doing the mixed use was to get away from like a strict commercial feel.
That's great. And then just a little bit of a follow-up on the density question in town. I think my biggest worry would be that people alone don't bring vibrancy. There's key elements like placemaking and walkability and all of that. So can you just talk a little bit about how we as council can balance those those things to ensure that, like we can hear through all the feedback that people really love the downtown and the feel of the downtown. So how would we maintain that, if while inviting that kind of density?
Through the chair. I mean, one redevelopment of downtown is going to be extremely incremental. And it's going to take place over many years, just from experience and also looking at the makeup of many strata buildings and buildings that aren't that old downtown. So one, it will be slow and council can always adjust the dial in the future if you don't like what you see. I think the other thing is like, this is a land use perspective, but in terms of the development permit guidelines and making sure that those guidelines are in place to encourage building forms that increase viability and also speaking to a policy regarding placemaking in the OCP is also possible, and other documents such as your specific downtown strategy.
Okay, we have Councillor Kerr and then Councillor Grant.
Thanks, Mayor. Nancy, thank you. I guess I have a question about the mixed, so the mid-rise mixed use and the low-rise mixed use. So example for the low-rise mixed use across from Highland, for example, that new potential one, and then the mid-rise mixed use just to the east of town, kind of expanding the downtown to like the bottom of Pritchard and Stewart. So there are, especially those two there, there's currently some low-rise apartment buildings. If let's say we designate them mid-rise mixed use, could someone underbuild that? So could someone come along and say, you know what, I want to still do what's there now, or knock the buildings down and put up new modern ones? Are they forced to do the mixed with commercial, or could they decide to do just residential? Thanks.
Through the chair, typically, most municipalities aren't implementing minimum density zoning, although there's a pendulum shifting towards that. So that people, again, zoning can be used to encourage what you want to see and not what you don't want to see. But right now, I don't believe the town of Comox has any like minimum density zoning, so you can always deliver or underbuild, if that makes sense for the owner doing it at the time. But council, I mean, in the future, council may consider minimum densities in some situations.
Councillor Grant, it's questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just wanting to remember that, you know, what we're really doing tonight is putting some ideas on a map that we're going to take out to the public. And so I think you said it earlier, but be bold with that, because if the public doesn't like it, they'll take it off. And we can get the plan we want if we do that. If we start small, they'll want smaller, right? And so I think that you have to be a little bit bold with some of these things. And there's even some things in here that I don't really agree with, but I think they should go on the map anyway and let the public come to the table and tell us what they think. And then we can start making our plans from there. This is just the really beginning part of it, right?
The middle. We are still with questions for Nancy. We'll go to Councillor Hazlitt and then Councillor Blacklock. And then depending where we're at, we'll move into some of the considerations for feedback for the map. Councillor Hazlitt.
My question is just kind of around the bottom of Knight Road there, and I mean, it's not a lot of people are going to love it, but we've got these agricultural sections, and truthfully, I can't really remember what's on a lot of them other than small house and, you know, 40-year-old, 50-year-old trees or something. In the event that we were trying to build more and more out there to meet our housing needs, how does the ALR play into that? We're trying to take something out of agriculture and move it into mid-rise mixed use. So
I think a really simple way to say this is that the province will not allow land out of the ALR.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'd have to bring a really, really strong argument. And it's unlikely that we would ever be able to form one strong enough to convince the province to let land out of ALR.
Councillor Blacklock.
No, my question wasn't for Nancy. It was just to point out it's the original comment was it's always easier to go down than up. So start high.
Okay. Final question, and then we'll go into discussion.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm thinking of the missing middle and the really nice additions that we've seen in town along Anderton. Of those townhomes, great use of large lots that previously had one home on it. And they look lovely. They bring a lot of people, they're on traffic thoroughfare. Just a question about Rob Road, the stretch. There's a large number of large lots. Was there any consideration for having those potentially townhome developments? Thanks. Sorry, but we could zone it light brown and then using the colors and then kind of predestine it for easier townhome building.
Yes.
Maybe I'm just to get clarification, are you asking, could we go in and put a zone in there with a minimum density to prevent single family homes and require townhouse development?
Yeah, that's one level up, but even just to designate it, brown is, let's get the terminology right, low rise residential, to kind of signal that we'd like to encourage townhomes there. I'm not so keen on the minimum, but just to encourage, if we had a different color on the map, it might say to people, hey, maybe we should purchase it and put some townhomes there.
Just through the chair for clarity, ground oriented residential allows for townhomes. So the next question will be coming to council with in June is, where do you want to pre-zone? And because townhouses is such a in short supply, you know, those are the types of questions that council could be providing direction on.
Yeah, just sorry, and additional clarity. So the light brown, the low rise residential is up to a 4-story building. The townhouses are what is allowed in the ground oriented residential. And so if you already you're indicating acceptance of the townhouses on those areas. And then if you really want to take it to the next step, it would be minimum density.
Councillor French.
I'm just wondering how much market viability goes into what you're doing? Like, I mean, I look back at apartment buildings, they were going up like crazy in the 70s. They overbuilt them. Didn't see another one for 40 years. And then all of a sudden, boom, we need them, and here they go again. And so if we're putting this plan together, like I'm thinking specifically of townhouses, people haven't been building them because they're not making any, you can't make any money when you build them. There's no viability in them, or there may be now, but I mean, there hasn't been as we go into this. So, you know, you start zoning everything this way, and then nobody shows up to build it. What happens? Like, how does that go?
So just to be clear, our ground oriented residential designation in the OCP will allow single family up to the 4-unit townhouse, which is part of SHMU.
Just for clarification, it'll actually allow townhouse, like larger townhouse complexes without an OCP amendment. But most of the zoning is for SHMU. So that's where we'll come into that pre-zoning conversation where you want to encourage townhouses in areas like Rob Road, for example. That's a June conversation. And to answer Councillor Grant's question, or do you?
Yeah, no, so there's no, the way it's structured right now is there's no requirement to build townhouses in those areas. If you want to structure it as single family, you can still move forward as single family.
Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I know we're required to review this every 5 years, correct? So if we don't get it right, how intensive can we do with making any changes?
Through the chair, you can be amending this plan as much as you want, or if someone has an idea that we never thought of, that go to council for an LCP amendment. Some municipalities are a lot stricter on this is our vision and we don't really want to, you know, veer off course. But then if someone has a good idea, I mean, that's the beauty of council's discretion is you can consider it and amend it at any time in the future. In terms of the 5-year review, the whole purpose of this is a lot of these, like yours from 2011, it's getting older. Now you have to do it by legislation every 5 years, so you can always adjust the dial. If you're sort of underachieving some of your goals and objectives of the plan. In terms of the economic viability, to Councillor Grant's question, I mean, it factors into some of our considerations for sure. But we're looking more at like good land use planning and also recognizing that over time, economic viability changes significantly. I mean, I can tell you a lot of stories where people are saying there's no way there's going to be an apartment built in this location, and now there's, 10 of them. So I mean, it does change, and if we just did it based on economic viability, it wouldn't necessarily reflect the best vision or land use planning for the community. But at the same time, I think some of the reason why you're seeing, recommendations for 5- and 6-story buildings in certain areas is also reflecting viability at this time.
Okay, so I think we'll move into some of the discussion points around the vision and the map and those priorities. So thank you to Nancy and Aaron for answering our questions so far. That was a good start to the conversation. I know everyone's really passionate about where the OCP is going over the next 3 or 4 months. So when we go into the discussion, I'll just remind everyone during the regular council meeting, we'll go through the chair. We'll give everyone a chance and opportunity to speak, and we'll get into some good dialogue on the OCP here. So going back to
Maybe
CEO Wall.
I'll just jump in. Thank you for that lead in. What the recommendation on the report is to move forward the map for consultation, including the guiding principles as they're listed now. It is important for us to receive any change in direction from council on where you want to be. This does not have to be specific. You do not need to say, hey, I want to see this specific parcel changed. If you say, I would like to see the Anderton corridor developed differently because of this, I'd like to see more commercial nodes out in Eastern Comox. You can give us that higher level of direction, and we will go and take a look and see what makes sense based on the information that we have. But I would encourage council to start giving us those higher level directions if there's changes that you want to see. So I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. So with that, we are on page 386, and the 2 recommendations listed from the Chief Administration Officer are on number 1, that council endorse the draft OCP vision and guiding principles, and number 2, that council endorse the flexible OCP with medium pre-zoning approach. There are alternatives to the recommendation, and I'm just going to give the page number for the vision so everyone can have it there. It's on page 3. The vision is on 389, and the updated guiding principles are also on page 389. So that's part 1 of the motion. If someone wants to move, please use your mics if possible.
Okay.
Moved and seconded, and
Get the map attempt back up so we can see what we're actually talking about.
sure. We'll get staff to have that up. So at the moment, it has been moved and seconded of what is on page 389 with the updated vision and the updated guiding principles. And for discussion, Councillor Haslett.
Thank you. So there's one of the guiding principles I'd like to see just maybe changed a little bit, and then there's one that I wouldn't mind adding in there. I'm trying to get to 389. So number 4 reads increase housing diversity through land inside the Comox or the containment boundary. I'd like to see that change to something along the lines of like increase housing diversity, stock, and affordability. I think we can all recognize that different stock is what we need, and that's going to help make things more affordable for different people, because we're going to have, the higher end, not necessarily the lower end, but more affordable end of it. And diversity is just a super fun word that people say now. The other one that I wouldn't mind adding in there is enhance employment and economic development. I think we've got a really, a large vision ahead of us here. We've got the employment lands down there. We really want to if these are our guiding principles, I feel like we really need to state that we're trying to make more work in the town of Comox for people. I think that one change to 4, and then adding in the one respects to the employment and economic development are really important for our guiding principles.
Okay, do you mind just making a motion and splitting them into 2 so we can have a discussion on each of them separately? So choose one.
There's a motion on the floor.
That is correct. So if you have an alternative motion, which is what you would have, we would be defeating the current motion and you would be having a new motion come forward. Or we can do an amendment also.
So I believe the motion on the floor is number 1, that council endorse the draft OCP vision and guiding principles. So Councillor Haslett could make an amendment to say that the OCP, the draft OCP vision and guiding principles be amended on section 3 to read section 4 to read, what page is it? Okay, sorry, that's the draft OCP and vision be amended in section 4 to read increase housing diversity, stock and affordability throughout the land inside the urban containment boundary.
Yeah, and then
So we can deal with that one and then come back to the second one.
Okay, that's been moved. I'll second. So as an amending motion, is there any questions or comments on that wording change of number 4? I seconded.
Can we read it again, please?
Increase housing diversity, stock and affordability throughout land inside the urban containment boundary.
Councillor Grant.
And so I'm still concerned about the employment lands up there and that we've got that wrong. And I know what we're about to do here is pass a lot of this stuff, which is probably good. And then take it to the public, but the public is not going to look at the employment lands the same. They're going to look at that like, yeah, whatever, right? Nobody's going to go up there and say, hey, change that or do this. And that's going to just skip through. And I'm not convinced we've got it right. So I'd like to have a little more discussion on what we really think we should do with that. The rest of it, you go and put a big apartment beside somebody's house, they're coming out to see, right? Like you'll get engagement on that. I don't think you'll get much on the employment. So
Just for discussion point, I think we're discussing on the amendment for number 4. So that would probably come up after we vote on the amendment. Is there any questions or comments on the amendment? Anyone need it read out? Good. Okay, all those in favor of number 4's worded amendment? And now we are back to the amended motion for discussion. Is there any further questions or comments on the wording of number 4? Can we get read out one more time, please, before we vote again?
Increased housing diversity, stock and affordability throughout land inside the urban containment boundary.
Perfect. And just for staff clarification, we would be voting on 1 through 9, and then another one could be added after as we split them.
So I missed, did council adopt or approve the amendment?
Yes.
So now, if you want to make further amendments, I would do that prior to adopting the original motion.
Okay, so Councillor Haslett, if you want to make
I'd move
the
that
motion.
we add as a 10th guiding principle, enhance employment and economic development for the town of Comox.
Okay, I'll second. So for discussion, that's an amendment to add a 10th guiding principle as stated. Any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. So there's now sorry, I'm going to go back. We were voting on the amended, adding it as an amendment.
Correct.
So I'll go and just do a quick revote on that. So we're voting on allowing the 10th one as an amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Are there any further amendments to the 10 guiding principles before we vote on the 10 that would go forward to public? And we also are voting on the vision, so we can have that discussion also. Councillor
I'm
Grant.
still wanting to know if we couldn't change 1150, which is light industrial, to mid-size residential, mid-size apartment residential. I think it makes more sense, actually, if nobody lives.
Just for clarification through staff, that's on a further motion, not the guiding principles.
I would,
believe it comes later.
yeah, I would suggest that council can deal with both of the recommendations from the CAO, 1 and 2. And then you can also at that point get into changes after you've done that on anything else that you'd like to see. And then that council can come to agreement on the larger issues of the OCP vision guiding principles and whether or not that flexible OCP with medium pre-zoning is where you want to go. And then after that, if you want to see changes into where you want mixed use, where you want the industrial, all of those can follow after recommendation 2.
So I'm 4 hours too early.
I might follow up with you. I think I caught where we're gonna jump around to, but may follow up, but Councillor Mayor.
Sorry, so I want to suggest adding neighborhood nodes into the principles. At what time would I do that?
So after recommendations 1 and 2 are dealt with, I would suggest that council start taking up amendments to the map, unless your amendment is to do with creating a conservative OCP or a more restrictive or open pre-zoning approach. I think you can deal with both of those issues and then get into the changes on the map that both Councillor Mayor and Councillor Grant are talking about.
Which is part D. The property specific decision.
No, the property specific decisions will come after. So if council just deals with 1 and 2 before you go to the next report, you can deal with the employment lands and the changes to commercial nodes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I think I heard Councillor Mayor say she wanted to make an amendment to the guiding principles, which would be now.
I missed that. So that would be, if it's guiding principles, it would be now, correct? Councillor.
Thank you. I was just gonna try to keep it very, very simple and just request to add neighborhood nodes into principle number 1. So it would read, prioritize integrated community planning, neighborhood nodes, and neighborhood nodes with strong links between land use infrastructure, active transportation, and community amenities.
So it's a amendment with just neighborhood nodes on number 1, not a number of it.
Correct.
Okay, I'll second that. So for discussion, number 1, having neighborhood nodes added in, we have Councillor Hazlitt and then Councillor Grant.
To Councillor Mayor, I'm hoping you can just explain to me a little bit more so I can understand a little bit more what you're talking about. I don't entirely follow what a neighborhood node is. Like, is Foxwood a neighborhood node? Is
Foxwood would be a neighborhood node if they could walk to, I think they probably all can walk to Guthrie and Anderton. They would be a neighborhood node if that little pink bit across from Highland does go in and somebody put in a little coffee shop or grocery store there, then they would be a neighborhood node. But without that, you have folks who have to walk 30 minutes, which they don't do. So it's just, it's really about creating more opportunities for community connection and kind of public gathering spaces in places that aren't within that walking zone. And there's only a couple spots missing, but it would be maybe presenting, I can't remember what the map is because I still call it a heat map, and it's a walk.
Bring the heat map back up, Tammy.
The walkability map, it would be addressing the spots on there that are yellow.
so then sorry, just to clarify here, so say there's a single family lot that's in there right now and somebody buys it or doesn't buy it and then changes it, would a node have to have like 3 or 4 stores and
No,
circle it, or is it literally just like coffee shop
it
or
could literally
somewhere to
just,
sell flowers or something like that?
exactly. Yeah, it's very simple, but it can actually really add quite a lot to a neighborhood in terms of livability and connection.
So I'm not sure how, so if we put this in as a guiding principle, is it now locked in and that's what we're going to do? Or are we gonna get some professional help on whether this actually makes sense or not? And the reason I'm asking is because these things go broke all the time. It's almost a given that they're gonna go broke if you don't do them right and in the right spots. It's not a simple matter of just opening a little spot. You're just gonna bankrupt somebody if you do that. You have to be a little more strategic, I think. And I'm not an expert in how you do that, but I certainly know that you need enough population density to make it work. And they've got those numbers out there. I don't know what they are, but you know, to me, it would be great. I mean, I can see your vision. It's perfect. I just don't know that it's viable.
I may get staff to comment, but
If,
this is a draft copy. Okay, earlier when I said we weren't going to be speaking through each other, it was for this purpose specifically. So over to CAO Wall, this is a draft vision and guiding principles, but
if council makes the change, as if council adopts the amendment that's on the table, we would go and take a look at the map as we have it now, and we would make amendments to try and provide additional commercial spaces within the areas that have low walkability scores right now under the OCP designation. That does not mean that there would be immediate zoning placed. That would be a decision that council would make in the future, but we would provide OCP designations for additional commercial in these areas.
So would there be some research done into numbers and what the population has to, I know guys that do this and they know all these numbers. They can tell you you need 1,000 houses within X number of blocks to make this work or whatever it is. Would you look into it that way? Because otherwise they're just going to go broke.
here to CAO Wall.
Not at the OCP stage. If council wanted to take it further where you're going in and doing zoning in those areas, I think that's probably getting to the point where you may want to undertake those exercises. All you're doing when you're making that change to the OCP is inviting people who feel that their property could be used in a different and better way to submit their zoning applications. Likely what you'll have to do, and what we see with providing commercial, is that you have to combine commercial with residential. So you would take something on the map that is zoned or in the OCP right now that only provides, you know, up to 3 stories in the ground oriented infill. You give them the low rise mixed use designation. And if they feel that there is market viability to redevelop with that ground oriented or with the ground floor commercial, then you'd get a zoning application in at that time. So making that change in the OCP, especially on a designation right now that is only ground oriented infill or even the low rise, is likely not to cause too much negative economic impact. It's just inviting the opportunity for change if the landowners see it's viable.
So it's not forcing that to be built. It's the option for someone to do their own due diligence on the economic viability. So we are still discussing the amendment on number 1 of adding neighborhood nodes. Is there any further questions or comments on the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? And that amendment is added in. So we are looking still. We're looking at number 1 having the wording changed, number 4 having the wording changed, and number 10. Hopefully everyone's comfortable with the memory on that. And this is a draft, so we'll be able to see those all together. Are there any further questions or comments or amendments on either the 10 guiding principles or the OCP vision on page 389? Councillor Blacklock.
Well, I'd just like to clarify something. Mayor, I spoke out of turn and I didn't mean to offend her. With respect to community neighborhood nodes, that you'll note I did vote in favor of that amendment, and it would be great to see them. You know, for those of us who've been here a long time, we'll remember that we had a lot more commercial corner stores in the 70s, 60s, even into the 80s, and they went away. And I remember fondly riding my bike or skipping down the corner store. So if someone wants to do it, let them do it.
They weren't allowed condos above at the time, so maybe there's a modern corner store coming. Okay. So that council endorse the draft OCP vision and guiding principles as we've amended this evening. All those in favor of the draft? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you for that great discussion and remembering to speak through the chair during debate.
I'll
We-
move to.
Thank you. So 2 is moved that council endorse the flexible OCP and medium pre-zoning approach as shown in option 3 of the April 16th, 2025 report from Randy Houle, Director of Development Services. The report is titled OCP Update. Questions or comments on the flexible OCP with medium pre-zoning approach? So those were the 2 different decisions that we spoke about with the visionary approach, I believe. Questions or comments? Now is the time to speak. Councillor Kirk.
I just want to thank Director Houle and CAO Wall for this report. It was really good, really outlined the decisions. And I also appreciate Nancy's 3x2 table, which was great. I drew one myself this afternoon, so seeing one up there would have saved me some work. So yeah, really clear decision, and I'm personally very happy with this flexible or visionary OCP approach with the medium pre-zoning approach. I think it's kind of the right way to kind of split down the middle, not too hard, not too soft, just right. So yeah, really happy to move forward with this.
Thanks for those comments, and yeah, thanks to CAO Wall and Director Houle for this presentation and urban system. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. I believe through CAO Wall, this is the time to discuss if there are any areas that council wants to look at on the map before we move on to the property's specific decision, although that's also what this is somewhat. So are there any areas that people want to have for discussion? Councillor Grant and then Councillor Hazlett.
Sure, I'd like to look up at the employment lands, and I think it's 1150. It's Martin Haig's property, and that we would change that to a mid-size apartment rather than industrial.
Is it possible to have the map zoomed in at all, or is that?
Can we move back down to the, maybe do you want to bring up the industrial one specifically, the 3 industrial uses?
Perfect. So it's the bottom rectangle
Bottom rectangle.
on the 2 on the right. Councillor Grant, did you want to speak to it before I move on to Councillor Mayor?
Well, sure. I mean, it just seems to me that if he's got the ability to say no to running our pipe through for our stormwater drainage, he can stop everybody from doing everything. And I think that by the time you look at what's actually viable to do on his property, it's very small. And I think we're going to handcuff him from ever being able to sell that for a long time if we have a small piece there that wants to go light industrial and that there's just no uptake for it. So I think we should just change it and let him put some residential or mid-sized apartment on it.
Just for clarification over to CAO Wall or Director Houle, is there, the pipe is going in future there? Or is there some clarification on what that might look like for that property specifically?
Yeah, you
1150.
you eventually need to get the stormwater that's south of that land into the Queen's Ditch going north. Generally, you want to work cooperatively with the landowners to provide this, but if you ever got into the situation where a landowner was simply refusing to provide it and it prevents your ability to develop other lands, the council would just move forward with expropriating the SRW.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification on that. Councillor Hazlett and then Councillor Blacklock.
So my question's on the same property, the one just to the north, or the northwest, I should say. We've got some pretty big ideas with this. I don't know if we even do this. Has anyone even spoken to the landowners, like to know where they stand on any of this? Like, are they in, oh yeah, slash it and put up a warehouse, like, or are they totally against what we're trying to do here? I understand we're looking at a long-term idea for the community, but I also don't know that I feel right. Councillor Grant said it, handcuffing a resident with never being able to sell their land. That's the town of Comox has the opportunity to help expropriate that.
Sure, I'll go to CAO Wall, but this is the last kind of couple days is the first time this specific land has come up, and that came out of our strategic plan of saying, where could we look at employment land? So the question could be, where else could they be potentially? But this is our first look tonight in the public purview. Over to CAO Wall.
Yeah, and we would get that level of feedback back from the landowners and community as we went out to community consultation. I suspect that the landowners would oppose a change to industrial. Residential is a much more known quantity. Just to be clear, the town wouldn't be looking to expropriate the land to turn it into industrial. There's the potential that you, if needed to, you could expropriate an SRW to provide the servicing required, which happens, I think, fairly regularly when you're looking at land development. So functionally, though, the question is to council whether or not you want to make this change and go out to community consultation on it, or if you want to go to community consultation on it in a different land category. And the items that Councillor Haslett brought up and Councillor Graff brought up are well within council's purview and reasons to make a different decision if that's what you wish.
Okay, we'll go over to Councillor Blacklock.
CAO Wall just answered my question. Thank you.
Councillor Mayor.
I'm just wondering if a mid-rise mixed use might be a more appropriate change to keep that commercial option and to think about that as more as transitionary kind of land into the pure residential as it's proposed there. I started thinking about this area as potentially being more like Tin Town, rather than like originally when we were talking about it, I was like, oh, more recycling and composting and things like that, which wasn't very exciting. But when I think about it as a more dynamic space, you know, Tin Town-esque, I actually do get a little bit more excited. And I can imagine that block that Councillor Grant is proposing to switch back to residential, if we could keep it as mid-rise mixed use, it would still have the option for some commercial. So I'd be more in favor of keeping it open to having a bit of commercial.
So I'm not switching it back. I'm leaving it the way it is.
Okay, we're gonna go through CAO Wall. Director Houle has a comment.
Thank you. I also just want to make sure that council is aware of the term they're using and the implications. So currently staff have the area to the south as low-rise residential, meaning up to 4 stories. So if you are using the term low-rise mixed use, I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, I just want to make sure you understand when up to 4 stories is low-rise, up to 6 stories is mid-rise.
So can you tell me what low-rise mixed use is? Because I'm not 100% clear what mixed use allows you to do.
It would be similar to what we see on Anderton in the Broad Street development, where you have commercial on the ground floor and then residential on top.
We're gonna go over to Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I guess when I thought about the opportunity to expand the employment lands, I wasn't factoring in the pieces that would be undevelopable. So I'm finding it's a little disappointing to keep it with that new designation of industrial. And I think it would be much better use of a Tin Town approach. It fits better with the whole corridor and the base, and I think that would be a good way to go.
That's good comments. Thank you. I don't think we do have a motion on the table. So if anyone at any point would like to make a motion, I believe this would be the time to have that type of map change considered.
You asking me to dream up a motion now?
I can make one up if you want.
All right, so so I would move that we change is it well, it's not zoning, the OCP designation on 1150 Pritchard Avenue to a, I think I said, mid-size.
Low rise mixed use.
Low rise would be fine, or even a mixed use with low rise would probably be good too. Although I can't get my head around that quite, but it could work. Yeah.
Okay, I'll second. And so just to clarify, low rise mixed use is like we've been seeing up on High Street, Broad Street, where they're doing the commercial on the bottom and up to 4 stories. So mixed use, sorry, low rise
Mixed use.
mixed use.
Yeah.
It's commercial up to 4 stories. Counselor, so that's been moved and seconded, and that's again for 1150 Pritchard. Hopefully we're getting the address correct, which is on the bottom 2 right maps, the bottom rectangle, which is currently on this map for Wall to consider employment lands. Counselor Kerr.
Yeah, I support that, and further, like my question to Nancy earlier, it could still be built as all residential. It wouldn't have to be mixed use. So again, we're saying here, and if someone wants to build there, that's okay.
That's correct. Counselor Mayor.
Sorry, just one other question. It's about the definition, and maybe I just need to go and read about it, but I just want to make sure that the Tin Town idea fits in with that particular zoning, or that it fits in business park.
Yeah, thank you. So on whether or not it can be full residential or it would be commercial and residential, that's not the decision you're making today. But you will need to make that decision when you get into the zoning for the area. I think and again, it's not the discussion that you need to have today, but I think it's important for council to consider that almost all of the mixed use commercial residential that we have, the commercial was forced by the town to be there. And if you don't force it, you're likely to get pure residential. Not guaranteed, but you're likely to get pure residential. So if you want to have a Tin Town, you likely have to affect that through zoning.
Which is not what this motion is doing. Okay. Are there any further questions or comments on the motion for 1150 Pritchard to be low rise mixed use? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Are there any other map specific considerations before we move into part D? We have Director Gould who has comments there.
Thank you, Worship. I would just ask if council, since you made the previous decision, if you would also consider the 2 properties to the south being mixed use now. They're just strictly residential, but you've gone and changed it sort of a mid-block commercial. Do you wish to also include the 2 properties to the south, just so we have an idea for the next version of the map?
We just get clarification either by address or on the map, which is it the 2 that are
1000.
Yeah.
1000 Pritchard and 1490 Cambridge.
it's the odd size.
The 2 to the south in that same block on the same side, on the east side of Pritchard.
Maps coming back up. I think.
Do you want to change the brown to pink?
Okay, just questions and I'm still processing that. So we have Councillor Mayor and then Councillor Blacklock.
I feel really uncomfortable changing the draft OCP designations based on the things we don't know. We don't know whether the province is going to give us these lands for potential recreation. We don't know how the stormwater servicing is going to work out in this neighborhood. I don't want to put us in a situation where we've handcuffed the property owners because we weren't aware of things. So I think we should just run it as presented to the public and then continue to work and listen and make sure we do the best thing in the end. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Counselor Mayor. To be clear, though, that was a Counselor Mayor. I apologize. Apologies. 1150 Pritchard has been changed, so as long as that motion, we're aware that that one got passed, I apologize. Counselor Mayor.
I feel like I would just want to defer to staff to make adjustments that reflect best practices based on that shift. So I'm like agnostic. I would defer to you, to staff, on if that change that we just made requires some shifts before this map is brought to the public.
Over to staff for clarification. If we don't make specific property changes, there would be no more changes, or would there be possible staff input based on that one change that was made?
So with the guiding principles change, we will be taking a look at other potential commercial nodes based on, you know, the walkability and complete communities. There's the potential that we would take a look at this area specifically and try to determine whether or not adding it into those areas would help meet council's guiding principles of having additional nodes. Otherwise, it would remain the same.
Thank you. Are there any other areas for discussion before we move into the property specific decisions on the draft map that will be coming back to us in June? Okay, so we have that one updated change. We're now moving on to page 428, the official community plan update property specific decisions. There is, just going to go page 428. There is the staff recommendation, and then there is the 4 alternatives to the recommendation. I won't read out the alternatives, but the recommendation is that council support in principle the draft OCP land use map as shown in attachment A of the April 16th report. If there is a motion for either the recommendation or one of the alternatives to the recommendation for discussion.
Just quickly, if the recommendations moved, it would now be as amended at the meeting and not as presented.
Thank you. So if someone is going to make the motion for the recommendation, it just has to be as amended, or we can discuss any of the alternatives to the recommendation. I think Councillor Kerr had his mic on, and then we'll go to Councillor Mayor.
I'll make the motion to get things started. As amended.
I'll second.
Thank you. So the recommendation as amended is on the table. Are there any questions or comments on the recommendation? Councillor Haslett.
So just, it's getting late here, so I want to make sure I'm voting on, I think I'm voting on. 1, 2, and 3 are dealing with some pretty large buildings in Comox. How far are those off the route map that we have right now?
We'll go over to CAO Wall. So that's the first 3 on page 428.
2181 Comox is currently in the OCP at, I'm looking back at Randy, at 4 stories, I believe, and this would be a change to 6. Here, 6 to 9, sorry. So it's currently at 6. This would be a change to move it to 9 stories. The Cedar property is ground oriented infill, and the request is to move it to, I believe, a low rise apartments, mid-rise apartments. And what's the third one? The marina is, yeah, the 12-story change. So going from 6 to 9 on 21 Comox or 2181 Comox Ave, from going to ground oriented infill to mid-rise apartments on Cedar, and then changing our marina's OCP designation to allow for up to 12 stories.
I'm not sure how we do this, but based on the conversation from Nancy and from what Steve had said and what Ken had to say about, you know, being bold and going out to the community to really see what they think. You know, there's some really, big buildings for the town of Comox in here. I'm not sure if Council Kerr would be open to adding in those three alternatives. And we can send it out to the public to see what they think about those ideas.
Over to Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, so I can give my opinion on the three of them, and we can chat about it. The Cedar Avenue one, I mean, that is residential neighborhood right beside Brooklyn Creek. I think it would be a great spot for infill, even subdivision and a couple of fourplexes or townhomes or something of the like. I don't think a 6-story building in that neighborhood beside Brooklyn Creek makes a lot of sense, to be honest. So I'm kind of happy leaving it the infill and hope that townhomes get built there, because that's what we need, according to the presentation. The other two I'm actually not opposed to, which may surprise some in the room. The 2181 Comox Ave, there's a lot of land sloping downward towards. So a nicely designed 9-story, 6 to 9-story building on the water might be really nice to look at, actually. Wouldn't block a lot of the view because it is sloping down. Wouldn't be much higher, as the report says, than the current building. And ideally, the current building could be left and used for affordable housing, in addition to like some nice luxury condos or whatever was going down by the water. So I'd love to have that discussion with the developer. And number 3, to me, I think we need a boutique hotel / more parking / condos downtown. So I was just at AVICC in Nanaimo. There's a beautiful, how many stories is that? 12, 15-story condo, building 12 down by the water. I think it might be a nice kind of eye piece for the town as well. So I'm actually not opposed to that, and seeing what the community feel about a maybe 4 stories of hotel and condos above and lots of parking underneath. I think it could be great for those using the marina recreationally as well, if there was that parking addition. So I'm not a fan of number 1. I think it's great how it is. Hoping that it is more than just one home on that giant property, but townhomes, and then the other 2 I'd be supportive of.
Thanks for those comments. Looking for further comments around the table. I'll just speak in support of what Councillor Kerr said. Also, number 1, I would like to leave off, but number 2 and 3, it would be nice to leave potentially as is and have a discussion on the height at a later time. Councillor Blacklock.
Well, I was going to agree. I also think that up to 6 stories for 1533 Cedar is too much, but I do support. And I know I can think of everyone I personally know in this town, and they will abhor to see it, but 9 to 12 stories for 2 and 3. I really would like to hear what people would have to say about that, because that is a significant departure from our 2011 OCP of small town character. So I would support putting them in the draft OCP, and let's hear from the neighborhoods and the people. As for number 4, that is a very strange little property at the northeast corner of Knight and Anderton. It is sort of a legacy, kind of right in the middle, right? So it certainly needs a review of its land use designation. And of course, this is complicated further by the fact that it's for sale. So, that's what I heard. In fact, there's a sign on the property, so we should all be aware of that.
Thanks for those comments. So it sounds like support for 2 and 3 before we look at amending motion. Councillor Mayer.
Yeah, I have nothing new to add other than support for 2 and 3 as well.
Okay, so we'll get a amending motion from Councillor Hazlitt. And just to be clear, we're not passing that these things happen. They are just going in the map before the draft OCP. And we're getting support for hearing from the public on these 2 spaces. We have Councillor Hazlitt, if you want to make an amending motion.
Make an amending motion that we add 2 and 3 as alternatives to the recommendation from CAO.
From the amended
Amended.
recommendation. Thank you very much. CAO Wall.
Yeah, so just to be clear, Councillor Hazlitt has moved alternative recommendations number 2 and alternative recommendation number 3. And those have been seconded and are now on the floor as a joint motion.
So questions or comments around that? We have Counselor Grant.
Yeah, just a reminder to everybody that on 1198 Anderton, it's not serviced, right? There's no water there. So, you know, to leave it like it is probably a bit of a misnomer for us. Can't imagine how you could do that, but I mean, you can leave it on there if you want, but I think that'll all shake out later.
Mayor, could I have a point of order just before, we actually had previous motion for the recommendation, so would these be, rather than a separate motion that we're voting on, should these be amendments to my original motion?
I believe that's what it was an amending motion. So
Yeah.
we'll be voting on the amendment and then
Thank you.
voting. Yeah, thanks for clarification and point of order. Counselor Haslett?
And again, by putting this out there and stating 1, 2, and 3, it was really just to get it out there to see what the public have to say, but I absolutely agree with the rest of the councilors here as to what I think would be the best use for 1533, but I really just wanted to make sure that we got this out to the residents of the town to see what they have to say.
Okay, perfect. So as Counselor Kerr mentioned, we are voting on the amending motion that we have the recommendation from the Chief Administration Officer, which was amended, and adding alternative recommendation 2 and 3 to the OCP map. So all those in favor of that amendment? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And now we are voting on the motion itself with the alternative recommendation 2 and 3. Any further questions or comments on that attachment A with the alternatives 2 and 3 for 2181 Comox Ave and the Harbor and Marina Comprehensive Development Area? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you for that discussion this evening. Okay, so we are moving on to notices of motion, and I believe there was going to be a notice of motion this evening to be read out and included on a future council meeting. There are any notices of motion to be added to May 7th? Councillor Mayor.
I do, and just a process check. So I read the motion.
No, that's so, yeah. What'll happen is if you have a notice of motion to read or to add, you read it out verbatim as it will appear on the next agenda. There is no opportunity for discussion or explanation for why you've added it at this time. And there's no clarification coming from the rest of council. So the notice of motion gets added on and then it gets debated at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Wow, that's an interesting process. Okay, well, here's my motion and we can all talk about it later. All right, so the name of the motion is identifying potential sites for affordable housing development in Comox. Whereas the town of Comox has provided notice to withdraw from the CBRD's Emergency Shelter and Supportive Housing Land Acquisition Service, Service 450, due to concerns regarding its expanded scope and governance. And whereas the 2024 Town of Comox Housing Needs Report identifies a projected requirement of 3,358 new housing units by 2041, which is approximately 210 units per year, including at least 806 units or 50 units per year of below market or deeply affordable housing to address the needs of vulnerable populations. And whereas the town of Comox recognizes the importance of proactively addressing affordable housing needs within its jurisdiction, therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to 1, identify and evaluate municipally owned lands and other potential sites within the town of Comox suitable for the development of affordable and supportive housing. 2, collaborate with local nonprofit housing providers and other stakeholders to assess the feasibility of developing affordable housing projects on identified sites. 3, explore funding opportunities from senior levels of government and other sources to support the development of affordable housing on these sites. And 4, report back to council with findings, including a prioritized list of potential sites, partnership opportunities, and recommended next steps by September 30th, 2025.
Okay, so thank you for that notice of motion. I'm having a bit of a technical glitch where my agenda has disappeared and it just says 0 on the top of my page, so I
We are into
correspondence.
reports from,
No, correspondence. I think we have,
Oh,
there was a
yeah,
letter for Pete,
correspondence.
from Pete Chambers next for a road closure, but when I went to, oh, we're back. Sorry about that. Perfect, thank you. And a
Sorry.
seconder? Any questions or comments on the road closure? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. There is also a correspondence letter from Lisa Dennis, Manager of Legislative Services at CBRD, for removal of the town of Comox as a participant in the Comox Valley Housing Service. That's on page 447. That has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor Mayor.
I'll just comment that this is what inspired my notice of motion to ensure that we were taking action on affordable housing while we're taking the steps to leave the service.
Thanks for those comments. Any other questions or comments before we vote on this? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you.
so just add something, going back to the road closures, what staff would like to request moving forward is that when road closure requests come into council, that we just forward them over to staff. What I'd like to get to is that council's not actually approving road closures anymore, support the event, but have the event organizers work with staff on road closures. And I think that this will work fine. If it doesn't, we may just bring it back to council next meeting for reconsideration. No, I will just let everybody know moving forward when they ask for a road closure that it comes to staff, not to council, and what can come to council is just general support for the event.
Thank you. That will be great. We're going to go around the table with reports from council. Please just share if there was something educational or an event upcoming, etc. We have Councillor Blacklock, Swift, and Hazlitt.
Nothing to report this week, but I am keen to hear about the ABICC conference and whether the resolution about wolf dogs passed or not.
It did. Councillor Swift.
I have nothing to report except a reminder that it's the Philburg Easter scavenger hunt and so on from 10 to 2 on Saturday.
Nothing to report.
Okay, we have Councillor Kerr, Councillor Grant, Councillor Mayor, please.
Just some quick good news from the CBRD Sewage Commission meeting. As you've noticed, lots of progress has happened. The sewer conveyance project, I thought some numbers would be fun to share. The Comox pipe installation is 68% complete. Downtown improvements are 75% complete. A lot of the paving is going to be finished this week. They're 4 weeks ahead of schedule for the Comox improvements specifically. And the big news is instead of the one roundabout in 2025 and then another one being done in 2026, both roundabouts at Rodello and the top of the hill will be done this year. So that's exciting. And back road, some really interesting numbers on volume, and because we've been getting lots of interest and comments about that. So westbound, so going to Courtney, there was a minus 13% volume change, so decreased 13% volume, which makes sense because you got one way easy to get to Courtney. But there was doubling of the volume coming to Comox. That's going to change very quickly as they're now doing work. Yeah, it changed as of now. But it was interesting, even though there was a doubling of the volume, which we expected, there was a decrease in speed by 8%, likely because of the volume. So the speed concerns, people racing to get back, didn't happen. It was just the volume increase, and that should change as it has now. So anyways, just thought give some updates. Lots of great work happening, and it's moving along faster and under budget, which is great. Ahead of schedule and under budget.
don't have much to report except to say that when we got that report on Back Road, I said, well, that just shows we need more cars.
Councilor Mayor.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of quick things and then we'll be ready to move into our in-camera meeting. Everyone remember. Thank you to Chief Schreider for having us for a great tour I believe that was last week, and showing us what some of the renovations and new building would look like on the site. That was really, really helpful to see all of the building and hear some of the history behind it. So thank you so much for that. CEO Wall and I have been invited to start attending bi-monthly meetings at Comox First Nation. I believe they're doing that with all the municipalities, but wanted to keep council in the loop. So if there's things like potentially cultural art at the roundabout or different opportunities, we're going to be talking to their council a little more often. So if there's anything pertinent to our Comox First Nation relations or events, etc., please let Jordan and I know. And we'll remind you of the times that we're going in advance as a reminder. There will be an RCMP event potentially coming to Comox, although it's just being discussed, but they're going to hold their awards and recognition of some of their RCMP in Comox here. So we'll pass along the information in the next week or two, and that's coming up in May, but they wanted to have that in Comox likely. And I will report back on ADICC. There was a lot of talks about the tariffs and what the possible implications there is. There was a lot of advocacy around how we do better, regardless of what happens with tariffs, around getting some of the provincial regulations on, you know, how nurses can travel between provinces. A lot of talks about products, alcohol, food, etc. But the discussions are much more what are the solutions and opportunities regardless of what happens with down south. So those discussions were actually really helpful to learn about what was happening and what the effect on economy will most likely be regardless. So I have some notes to type up for that, but they're not ready yet. It's just this weekend. And so without further ado, there are no media. We've tired everybody out. There are no media questions. Assuming there's no one behind there, no public questions. So we'll move to go in camera at 8:47. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? And I should read out that the public to be excluded from the in-camera session on April 16th, 2025, pursuant to the following subsection of Section 90 of the Community Charter in regards to litigation or potential litigation affecting the community. And I will now move for adjournment.